Oop, sorry. Hi. We're playing Shibuya again. I know, I'm surprised too. But this will be the last one. This will be the last Shibuya we have ever. Ever. But hi. Let's do it. So there's bonus content. At least it seems like it. How do I access it again? We're just gonna take a look at the bonus stuff. I'm not gonna promise I'm gonna do all of it, but I'll at least look at it. What is this? Oh, these are like the intros. I see. Oh, the things I've already seen. Okay. Should we do the quiz? Maybe I'll do the quiz. It will unlock more content. Let's try it, I guess. I like quizzes. The UA virus is approximately this many nanometers in diameter. Oh my god. I don't remember. 3. Chiatta. 4. Shit. Different question. Ask me anything else. It's the same question. 6. God damn it. 7. But did I try 5? 8. Oh my, it goes in order? I thought it'd be random. 9. 16. 13. I don't remember. Who remembers this? Fucking 106 and 136. You got me, bro. Oh, it's 3 oh my god. 3 digits? Oh, wait. Is it? No. Start with the first 3-digit number. It did say that. Oh my god. Sorry. Bro, I don't remember. 560. You saw the answer, so that's a hint. Start with the first 3-digit number. One? Right?
North is up.
Thank you. That helps. Almost there. Oh, I'm almost there. 1, 2, 3. Is that it? Let's see. I was close. I have to go back in the fucking story to see. I'm not doing that. We got 1, so let's just work with that. 1. When I count. What does that mean? I count 1, 2, 3, 4. We're doing 4 next. 5. I hate that I could have known this. They haven't mentioned it in a while, though. 97, 98, 99. 100. 101. Is there any other way you could give this in? Does it rhyme with something? I said fuck. I said the answer. What did I say? I said a lot of shit. 100 something. Just before 101. Is it just 100? Oh my god. Answering pop quiz questions correctly will let you read special episodes. Enjoy the tale of... Oh, I'm sorry. You did warn me about this too. I should not have done that. I'm so sorry. I'm not reading this. I should. Ozu snarled at the young man who sat before him in the dingy little office belonging to Takarada Financing. Do you understand what it means to break a promise between men? The man glared back at him. What do you want me to do? Ozu had seen the same look plenty of times before and he despised it. It was the look of a man who hadn't realized he'd already lost. Ozu hated people like that. Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I needed right now. Ozu hated people like that more than anything. 5 million and the interest on it hasn't been paid. But when was the payment for that interest due? Yesterday. Well, if we knew that, then how come we haven't paid it? Ozu's voice rose to a bellow that practically shook the windows. He couldn't tolerate anyone breaking promises, no exceptions. I understand. Is this before or after, like, the main story? Despite Ozu's fury, the man seemed unconcerned. I'll work it off. I'm in shape. His upper arms stopped bulging, or sported bulging biceps, and there were arms of a fighter. You would suggest doing the hidden scene with doing the commands in game. Okay, we'll have to see if we get to that. I'm gonna go back after this. We're gonna do the Kanon stuff. That looks kind of interesting. We're playing more Shibuya. What's up, me minor? That's so good. I can always sell my organs. It struck Ozu as ridiculous. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this. You warned me about this, and I didn't listen. I just thought I could answer these and have fun with it. Yeah, this is the last one. There's like a weird anime thing that they introduced at the end. I don't know what's up with that, so I want to look into that. It turned into an anime all of a sudden. I'm not jerking anybody off. I'm being serious. The man looked squarely at Ozu. What did you spend the 5 million on? I won't tell you. And he kicked him in the dick. Young man shrugged. I need some funds to set up a bank transfer scam. Oh? A scam like that requires a... What the f...
Alright, world!
Oh my god.
Get ready! See my dance! Invincible rape...
Oh! I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I knew I should have tested this. It cut off. Fuck. It cut off. I'm sorry. This game is ruining everything. No, so I'm gonna get it back. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Why'd it cut off like that?
All right, world, get ready.
I'm gonna keep reading this as she dances.
Rainbow arrow.
Oh, I have to sing it. Fuck. God damn it. All right, hold on. Let me get the... This is awful. Why do you have that much? I didn't think you'd have this much already. This is not cool. That are flying, I'm mass mystifying. You'll think that I'm lying on the hill of mine. A journey through time. Shimmering in fire, cold frost on the pyre. Fruit never expires in your eyes. You've seen in your mind. The old bow their heads while the blind lead the blind. The marble loses shine. The eye clouds by design. By the whole inner soul, the one hope, the one truth that we believe we can. We can make miracles. Wait, this is the best part. And then the devil, the time against you. Never let the fire fade in you. Goddess with wings, a rainbow set sail through the night sky to embrace you. All of your heart to take you. Never let this merciless world erase you. A torch to guide you, and you shall be bathed in light.
Tessa, you're the best!
Thank you for that. Yes, it does. Oh my god. I was hoping that... Yes, everyone give Tessa a big round of applause. A set, you bet! Ideally, what that should have done is it should have muted the game too. I don't know why it cut like that. That was weird. Yeah, we needed that. We really did. Alright, they're making like a scheme, something for suckers. They got suckered. I think a phone call, huh? There's a call I was like, working on. I was coaxing. This is great. Grandma, it's me. Did you get the money? Oh, Masa, is that you? Oh, wait, they mentioned that guy, didn't they? Masa? Old woman on the bench. Here she is. She's senile. Money? Is that what you wanted? The worst part is when I started the stream, I was like, oh, I didn't test the rainbow arrow thing. And then the minute I didn't test it, you fucking redeemed. I like definitely underestimated how much Mira you would have. I didn't think it'd be that much that quickly. Next time I'll make it better. Be perfect. Will you call me again? I will. It's a promise. Okay, please. Don't break your promise, Ozu says, and he snatched him up. You're working under me for the rest of my life. Don't break your promise. His kindness. The younger man still makes the rounds with Ozu, still deep in debt. His name is something. He's collecting money. Shaking at a guy. Well, that was awesome. How did you enjoy that tale of the loan shark's first meeting? I love that. We hope you found it entertaining. Now, here's some tempting info for you. In Osawa's story, in the 12 p.m. time block, rubber gloves appear at some point. During that scene, the background zooms away, right? Try waiting for that movement to finish and see what happens. Have fun with that. And see you next time. So, alright, so this is what you were talking about. The commands. Maybe I will try that, but not right now. Is that really all you have to say, sir? The scene with Kajimura with his yellow gloves. Okay, I see. Cool. I'm glad I did that. Get me the fuck out of here. No, stop. Detective Sasayama's pet name for his wife. It's like Beyonce, I think, right? That's close. Alright, get me out. Where was the thing again? I have to like load a save, right? Yeah. You get the white bookmark and the black bookmark. Then we can do this for bonus. They have Achi's sister story and then like fucking anime girl. I don't know what the fuck this is. Let's see what Kanan's all about. Alfard al-Shua. The solitary serpent. The snake has lost 8 of its 9 heads. In the Middle East, the snake is seen as an ill omen, and those who take it as their name are said to be both wicked and extremely cunning. If I give in to sentimentality, I will have lost my light all over again. The blue sun rose into the sky. As the girl rushed through the airport, she was met with the intense light of the summery dawn. Oh, is this actually animated? Wait. No way, right? What the fuck was... She let out a weary breath. A shaft of sunlight blazed across her face, and she squinted her eyes against the glare. The night had been a long one, and she could feel exhaustion taking hold. She wanted to stop and sink into one of the sofas in the airport lounge, but she didn't have time for that now. Oh, shit! Oh my god, it's voice acted. It's in Japanese, but it's voice acted. That's awesome. Halva? It's a popular confection throughout the Arab world, typically made with ingredients such as sesame, apricots, or grains. Originated in ancient Mesopotamia. Muttering curses that seemed at odds with her young face, the girl wove her way gracefully through the sea of travelers. Time was of the essence. All she had in her hidden back pocket were some dollar bills. What's a dollar? I don't know what that is. She was just going to have to acquire the gear she needed on site. It galled her to be so under-equipped. The only consolation was that at least she'd been able to arrange for a boarding pass in time. Sorry. Kanan refocused instantly as an unfamiliar man addressed her in Arabic. Was he a thief or some more dangerous third party? This was a country where both one's money and one's life could easily be at risk. She had one way to find out what kind of threat she was dealing with. Her voice was sweet and girlishly soft. He hadn't been expecting this. They hadn't told him what he was really in for. This girl was the natural enemy of the Serpent, a steely soldier in a proxy war. A professional freelancer who took any requests, and who always carried out her mission. A mere hour earlier, she'd taken out an armed syndicate 30 members strong. The red flowers of blood left in her wake, a testament to her rumored capabilities. The man was dumbstruck. What kind of twisted fairy tale was this? With mercenaries who looked like sweet little girls. It's anime, bro. His surprise shifted the caution. With all the bystanders around, it should have been easy enough to make a handoff without even the recipient ever noticing. He was proud of his skills, but still she'd seen right through him. She's known since the moment I arrived, he thought, and she hadn't figured it out from his appearance. She just intuited it somehow. She had also immediately sensed that he was ashamed, even though he'd kept his face a perfect blank. First, the girl had acted deliberately blasé. Now she was being downright cynical. She's a little unstable. And totally adorable. What? He had to remind himself that this was her. How many soldiers must she have killed? How many battlefields had she survived? Hers was the life of a professional assassin. The fact that she had retained apparent normalcy in the midst of such disorder was more than a little unsettling. The man was astonished that this was the famed rival of the Serpent. One did not strike at the snake without exceptional cunning and skill. Hers was the perfect camouflage, a mercenary in the guise of a child.
それで話の裏は取れた？
あ、確認は取った。大越製薬研究所所長大沢の娘は確かに誘拐された。
Oh, this is before.
こちらのセルの活発化は何らかの陽動と見るべきだ。
Kanan gritted her teeth. Her latest mission concluded just an hour ago. Concluded just an hour ago. Had been to meet with this armed group, the Serpent. That was fine. Everything had gone off splendidly without a hitch. The job had been even easier than she'd imagined. There was no cause to get bent out of shape. But the info she'd gotten her hands on had done quite a number on her mood. The Serpent herself is on the move. Japan, Shibuya, Okoshi Pharmaceutical, possible CIA involvement, presumed large-scale urban terrorism at work. That message had lifted the veil from her eyes. At long last, Alphard herself was out in the open, the head of the snake exposed. What a perfect opportunity to cut it off. But of all places to set the stage, Japan? CIA involvement could pose a problem. She wouldn't be surprised if the Serpent had already coiled itself around the Americans. When it came to the Serpent, not even the US government could be trusted to keep itself free of influence. And the target was Okoshi Pharmaceutical. If that wasn't a sign, she didn't know what was. Was that just a coincidence? No. Allah was Al-Qadir, all-powerful. Yet the girl frowned in disappointment. What need would he have to go so far to pen such a perfect tale? She had thought such grand acts of fate were a relic of the distant past. But she could sense its hand in these events. She hurried to get the intel confirmed at once, and had quickly arranged a flight to Japan. Maybe she was a freelancer, not aligned with any particular organization, but she still had connections. She had many tools in her arsenal. People were often the most convenient. If they excelled at what they did, so much the better. Many individuals sought to curry her favor. Sympathizers like the man who'd made the handoff here would intervene on her behalf. She said.
じゃあ行くけど、他に何か言われてる？
現地に一人ワキールを用意した。渋谷への足を用意しているそうだ。着陸後、貨物室から降りられるようになっている。滑走路から直接ハイヤーを飛ばす。
The man said.
無駄足にならないよう祈っているとも。思いのほか、ラフィーク・カナンは我らのアニールから高い信頼と敬愛を受けている。今回は最悪、痛み分けでいいそうだ。
She sighed. Go down fighting? So it's okay to die as long as I take the target down with me. The man thought of nothing but his honor, his pride. No reconciliation, no negotiation, no submission. 3 tenets that mattered more than preventing bloodshed. Whatever designs these two organizations had on each other were of no concern to her, but even so. For once, her client's wishes aligned perfectly with her own. Her flaxen hair trailed behind her as she went to board her plane. She didn't look back. The flight from Singapore to Japan was roughly 7 hours. The Serpent had surely anticipated that her enemy would pursue her there. In all likelihood, there would be a minimal window between Kanan's arrival in Japan and the Serpent's plan coming to fruition. The Serpent wouldn't be so clumsy as to let someone from back home in the Middle East, especially a foe like Kanan, find out about this by accident. If she'd let the plan leak, that meant it suited her purposes somehow. It would seem she wanted to entice Kanan to risk hope before trampling her underfoot. You won't lay a finger on me, the voice sneered at her, a backstage murmur in her mind. She dealt with the enemy's diversion, learned of the plan just in the nick of time, and rushed off to Japan without a second's hesitation. Japan was where it would all be decided. If she didn't do battle with the Serpent, she would lose yet another close friend. Had the Serpent engineered the situation simply to torment her? She spoke to herself to calm her gnawing impatience. The time it took to write Shibuya and the time it took to write Alphard were nearly the same, but the youthful and complex nature of the city of Shibuya won out. Her instincts were something akin to fortune-telling, a tendency to reimagine the world around her in a way that was neither wishful thinking nor sour grapes. Sour grapes? She had a sense of conviction that hovered near the truth, but she knew she couldn't let herself be optimistic. The serpent possessed a powerful venom. It was possible that, even if Alphard's plan were foiled, the life Kanan hoped to save would still be lost. There truly was no time to spare. Crushing the fringe group in Singapore had gone more quickly than she'd anticipated. She had planned on obliterating them at the break of dawn, but she had been struck by a sudden familiar sense of urgency and had acted an hour ahead of schedule. That change of plans had led to this. She had obtained the intel just slightly earlier than Alphard might have anticipated, and had put speed above all else in arranging the trip to Japan. Right now, she could only hope that the single hours she'd bought herself, would let her save her friend's life. Maria. A warm red flooded her mind. They'd met 2 years ago. She remembered the day as an ordinary one. An unassuming tourist was getting hassled by the same sorts of guys that cause trouble all over the world. Kanan's stash of her favorite snack had just run out and had left her in an irritable mood. Maybe that was why she'd stopped at the sight of the scuffle. Not that she had any interest in helping. The men just gave off an eyesore of a color. Their scent was far too noisy, and she wanted to be rid of them. I don't know what that. Shukran jazalan, said the grateful tourist, her hand outstretched. She asked if Kanan would be her guide, which Kanan tried to ignore, but the young woman persisted. This girl was a person raised in peace, from a peaceful country. Kanan wasn't the kind to hold that against her or rail against the unfairness of the world. It didn't mean she wanted to put up with it either. A Yabaniya like her was practically a different species. How could they even understand each other? Kanan was closer to an animal herself, and respectable people didn't get close to animals that were still untamed. Humans had overcome their feral side. They had become creatures of intellect. When such intellect was fostered over the years, the benefits were clear. And yet, this tourist approached her oblivious. Kanan could recall the warmth color for that moment. It still triggered her memories. It was a pleasant color, one that she had been touched by before. This tourist, Maria, was not so remarkable as to draw the eye. Nothing about her seemed especially worthy of admiration. There was just something special about the wholesome smile she offered to the dangerous creatures she should never have approached. Never ever. Kanan smiled. There was something powerful about people who couldn't get a read on their own situation. It was the first time she'd smiled earnestly in a long while. The first time she'd lost her light a second time. It would still be several hours before the plane landed in Japan. She did her best to ease her inner tension, to let herself rest in preparation for combat. Her orders were simple: save her friend, capture the serpent. The objective was the same as it had been before. That summer, 4 years ago, when she'd gotten the tattoo on her left arm. That very long day, when she'd been reborn as the Kanan she was now. Let's have a flashback. The Middle East's longest day. It's about to be. The rumbling of a diesel engine sounded in her ears. The color that went with that sound indicated that the... Ooh. Oh, shit. The color that went with that sound indicated that the sound, or the engine, was running well. The interior of the compartment was rife with the smell of Ramal. They are spitting right now. Or Ramal F? Sand? No. This is what Persona 6 is gonna sound like. A dangerous blue, a gentle red, a painful yellow. Those, the colors of the many people aboard the train as it chugged along. The train had... The train had set out from Al-Haditha, northwest of Baghdad, and after a journey of 300 kilometers, it was approaching the Jordan border. We need Persona to address desert music. At the front of the train was an antique diesel locomotive. This was followed by first-class carriages, I can't read this. Coach-class carriages, and also several of the women-only carriages unique to the Middle East. It was a long train, though not exceptionally so. In some Islamic countries, where men and women are prohibited from sitting together for religious reasons, women-only train cars are common. Surely we go to a Tommy one of those, right? Maybe. Depending on the country, the sexual segregation may be so strict as to apply even to children. Sometimes even young boys must separate from their mothers in order to ride in men-only carriages. It was remarkable that there was a line running between Iraq and Jordan. Traffic between the two countries, especially via railway, had been drastically reduced as a result of war. Many of the lines had long since fallen into disuse, but now that the West was working towards the reconstruction and stabilization of Iraq, Japan had also helped helped plan a railway between Iraq and Jordan, and had laid down a temporary rail line. The train's final stop was not the border, but 300 kilometers beyond it, in Amman, the Jordanian capital. This trip would be a turning point. Sundown would see the venerable old train service come to an end. Israeli border spotted. Dude, I think this is the guy or girl or whoever who wrote the Fate series or something. I didn't expect this weird tie-in. The compartment where Kanan rode was boisterous with noise and human energy. Wind and the sound of chugging wheels rushed in together through windows with no glass. As the only rail service currently linking Iraq and Jordan, the new line drew passengers from all walks of life. A freelance journalist returning from Baghdad, an Indian peddler carrying a piece of luggage larger than himself. Yeah, Nasu. Get ready whatever, I'm already used to it. That was this whole fucking game. A group of women who appeared to be members of some Scandinavian NGO. No one seemed bothered by the clamor. The passengers shouted and prattled on as they pleased. Various sounds, miscellaneous colors, profuse scents, myriad textures, manifold flavors. All of these sensations mixed together as if in a stew pot, and Kanan gulped them down with her little straw. Yet the stimulation they provided was weak. It was like lamb without enough salt, and so she reached into her pocket for a dose of her favorite pick-me-up, crunching it between her teeth. Kanan was in a foul mood. She was on this train to do a job, but nothing had happened for 3 hours now. So far, the journey had proceeded without incident, and she'd had no opportunity to act. Siam? The man she called Sharik had assigned her this mission. They were traveling together. Theirs was a rare team. No longer were they... Oh my god. Mudarib and Mutadarib, I guess. Master and student. They were partners now. Still, this was a complete letdown. The atmosphere on the train set her on edge. Despite the instability of present-day Iraq, there were no soldiers aboard, only several policemen. Supposedly, this limitation of the military presence was all out of concern for the complicated political situation, but she couldn't help but wonder if it was more a concern for saving money on soldiers' pay. The major powers touted peace while enforcing virtue, when they could be bothered. This railway was just one more example of their dubious policies, supposedly established to help foster interpersonal exchange and economic revitalization. It had originally been used for military transport until public travel was more useful for somebody's agenda. Her companion said, Kana.
別に信用なんてシャムしかできない。 そういうのが相手なら仕事はいつも楽だろうなって思っただけ。嫌ってるわけじゃない。
結構襟好みがないのはいいことだ。だが善意と私欲どちらが組みやすいかは仕事の内容によるな。善意には損得がない分人間らしい交渉が通じない。それはそれで厄介だぞ。
Virtue. Kanan sniffed. Virtue was just another name individuals gave to their own biased sense of justice. A rigid and fanatical concept subject to any number of arbitrary beliefs. One man's virtue was another man's depravity. It's also drawn by Takeuchi. I have no idea. Well, it did look kind of familiar. But I guess he's the... Is that a bad thing? I thought this was how the whole thing looked. That's how fate looked. The very idea made her think of those interminable meetings between political factions. People puffed themselves up as wise and sat at the conference table without the slightest interest in the other side's values. To them, all that mattered was that they had already decided what was good and right.
損得がないね。どうすれば利益が出るのか、どうすれば生き残れるか分かってるのに、目先のお金には転ばないってこと？
I find it funny. He draws very similar character designs.
もっと派手に人生そのものをつまずき続ける？
客観的に見れば安酒のようなものだ。それは手に入れやすく悪酔いしやすい。泥酔している人間に話し合いは期待できない。説得するより先にまず荒ごとで酒を抜かなきゃならん。
例えば眉間を秒速で打ち抜いて。
It is Fate Man. It's just, you'll see characters that definitely look like Archer and Saber. I did see, I was like, that looks kind of familiar. But I wasn't sure. So we got the same face syndrome going on.
まあ頭にアルコールが詰まっているかは疑問だが。
The man named Siam curled up the corners of his mouth. Though he wasn't a fundamentalist Muslim, he still detested alcohol as a tool of the devil. But his use of booze as a metaphor now was inspired less by his inner demons than by his unique sense of humor.
もう笑わない方がいいって言ったのに。シャム笑うと顔が怖いんだから。
Harsh, yes, but it needed to be said. Siam said, "This is just so weird. It's just so random. Why is it anime now?" This is like canonically tied into the Shibuya story. But like, whatever. It's kind of cool. It's interesting. The two had known each other for several years now. Back in the day, she had never known him to smile. As a change of habit, it felt unsettlingly like a sort of surprise attack.
知っている。そう忠告されて以来、笑わないよう努めていた。まあ、俺たちの雇い主は苦行を美徳としている。笑わないというのは方針に合っているだろう。
Oh, this isn't their first outing. Their third or fourth thing. Kanan herself was equally guilty of a rare display. Her own sour expression had completely turned around. The only time she expressed human-like joy was when she and Siam were together alone. Her name was Kanan. Trained by Siam, a veteran mercenary, she had just turned 14 years old. Kanan was not her real name, but a nickname given to her 2 years prior. Hers was a familiar story, that of a child who had lost her parents and her village to the ravages of war. Unlike most who shared such a beginning, however, she'd had two major strokes of luck. The first was the ability she had been born with. The second was that she'd met someone who taught her how to foster that ability. As a girl orphaned by war, she had almost inevitably taken up arms. Making herself useful to the powers that surrounded her had been the only way to survive. The only people she could depend on, the only ones who gave her anything, were them. The moment she didn't meet their expectations, she would go back to being a mere orphan. And so this girl, a victim of war, fell under the protection of the warmongers and was trained to be one of their soldiers. But then she was picked up by a man, Siam, who freed her from those who had robbed her of her past. He had no ideology. He was unlike the others she had known in her broken world. The wandering people who had formed a new nation to be their promised land, and the ones they had driven out, now wanderers themselves who styled themselves liberators. Siam was a mercenary who had been hired by those would-be liberators, but he paid no heed to the ideologies of either side. He was a soldier who lived to fight, knowing he was unlikely to see the conflicts end during his lifetime. Kanan didn't know how long Siam had been working as a mercenary, but by the time she'd wound up in his care, he was already a veteran worthy of her confidence. He told her that he'd been kicked out of the army, that he preferred solo missions where he could focus on his objective without worrying about fellow operatives. In that sense, he was something closer to an agent provocateur than an ordinary mercenary. Siam was well aware of his distinct style and position. He sometimes revealed a hint of shame at the fact that the assignments he was given were not officially missions, muhima, but instead referred to as jobs, emal. Still, he was known as a valuable asset on the Liberation Front. They were a guerrilla organization facing off against superior Israeli forces. A lone mercenary who could carry out major operations by himself, he had fit in well with the guerrilla strategy. The fact that he was disposable if and when the time came was also quite appealing. And Kanan, once Siam took her in, had grown not as a soldier but as a specialized covert operative. That was her good fortune. The orphan's talents weren't particularly well suited to acting as part of a unit. She was far better at being a solo diversionist acting against the enemy organization. Because she can, like, see colors, I guess. And so she had ceased to be a soldier, instead training as a diversionist. She fulfilled her new role adeptly. Siam and Kanan, they worked in concert as secret agents, infiltrating, gathering intel, conducting sabotage. She learned to operate without backup. Typically, one of the duo would sneak into enemy territory alone while the other acted in a logistics or liaison role. Here and now, however, with their objective aboard this moving train, responding to an urgent request from their employer, the two were working together as a team.
でも列車で輸送するってそんなに大きなものなの今回のは。
いや、物自体は個人で所有できる大きさらしい。中身は俺たちの管轄ではない。事実としてそれがあるかないかの確認が先だ。
なんだ、それならもう終わりだ。私とシャムで見て回ったんだから間違いないよ。この列車は外れ。どこをどう見ても普通の車両だし、おかしな手触りもないし。輸送の予定が1日ずれたか、こっちの動きが漏れたか。そもそも初めからそんな計画はなかったってとこじゃない？
いや、今回の情報に限って空振りはない。信用できる提供者だからな。
I think it's candy or something. They mentioned like she likes having some secret snack. I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to be. She's chewing on a Pocky stick. They'd received the intelligence just 2 days prior. Even by their own fast-moving standards, this job was inordinately rushed. A member of American military deployed in Iraq has contacted a Mossad agent. Israeli Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations. Okay. Indications suggest plans to deliver and hand over weapon. Board Iraq-Jordan railway and gather intel. Recover payload if possible. Destroy if not. Weapon to be transferred. Enemy escort and loadout all unknown. No logistical support will be provided during operation. Yeah, I didn't even know what that was. It was uncertain. This is like, I guess this is like his hyperfixation, maybe? It was uncertain why the enemy had chosen to move the mystery weapon along such a dangerous overland route, but the information came from a source that both Siam and the Liberation Front trusted absolutely. You need protection before you puff, that is true. Always protect yourself. The source made it clear that the enemy forces were in a hurry to transfer this unknown new weapon. This was a tip that the Liberation Front could not overlook, and they directed Siam to act immediately. The situation was somewhat delicate because the enemy had decided to use a train that crossed the border as their means of transport. Given the tenuous political balance in the region, the Liberation Front couldn't risk open military action targeting an international train running from Iraq to Jordan. Political pressure from Israel and the US might have led to the Jordanian government to give tacit consent to a weapons transfer, but if the freedom fighters intervened on a large scale, it would surely invite a military response. Worst case, things might spiral out of control and trigger yet another full-scale war in the Middle East. Thus, the job at hand required utmost secrecy. The enemy would disavow involvement in any clandestine transport, and those who moved against them must be similarly able to deny any involvement. Stopping and destroying the secret payload was a job for covert agents, and so Siam and Kanan had hurriedly boarded the train where they'd been spending their time staring out the window. For 4 hours had passed without any incident aboard. Now they were arriving at the halfway point in their journey, the Jordanian border. Is that Alphard? There, abruptly, things began to change. Without warning, the train, which had hitherto seemed like a promise of safe passage, grew thick with the dangerous scent of an escort convoy.
台車の変更？何それ？そんなの聞いてないし、聞いたこともないよ、シャム。
レール幅の問題だ。これまでレールはスタンダードゲージだが、ここからはロシアの援助で敷設された幅 1524mm のブロードゲージが残っているんだろう。レール幅が異なる路線を運行する列車は1両ずつ車体を持ち上げ、台車ごと車輪を付け替える。
The wheel exchange made for an extended delay. Each car in turn had to be removed from its couplings. Then each car was loaded onto a lift and refitted for the broad gauge tracks.
手間がかかるね。走れないなら、ここから走れる列車に乗り換えればいいの。
ダイヤの遅延に文句を言うほど裕福な乗客はいないさ。荷物を改められるわけでもない。列車も乗客も無事目的地に着けるのならそれでいい。
そう。確かにいちいち文句を言うほど余裕はないよね、私たちには。けどシャム。
Kanan sensed that there was more going on than just the switching over of the train's wheels. The train was being expanded. A freight car, clearly meant to carry goods of higher quality, was being added, sandwiched between a new pair of passenger cars. A total of 3 new cars were added. The only passengers in the 2 compartments surrounding the freight car were armed soldiers.
青一色だ。1車両に7人。合わせて14人。これも予定にあった？
いや、ここまでは考えもしなかった。貨車の増設か。あからさまだが事前対応は難しいな。
They were seeing a complex plan unfold, one that would be traceable after the fact, but which might be impossible to stop while it was in motion. They now faced a significant force of enemies that they might have to neutralize using only the firepower they had on their persons. Based on the orders Siam had received, there was 0 chance they receive any backup.
あいつらが兵士なのは間違いないけど、どこの所属かまでは見えないよ。
彼らが乗客に偽装した兵士であり、貨車が加わったのなら問題ない。イスラエル側の兵士かどうかは貨車の中身が証明してくれるさ。
そっか。今わかるのは、私たちのことはバレてないってことか。連中、安全だと判断したからことに出たんだよね。
そういうことだ。問題は。
The freight car transfer cast everything into doubt. It seemed to confirm that there was indeed a weapons delivery taking place, but recovering the payload was going to be more difficult than anticipated. The train transfer process finished without a hitch. The other passengers paid it little heed. Evidently, they were accustomed to this sort of delay.
強引な計画だね。おかげで応援を呼ぶことも装備の補充もできなかった。後先考えてない計画はやっぱり独特の善意から来るもの。
まあ、周りが見えてないあたり強硬派らしいと言えなくもない。
At last, the train left the border behind. There were no planned stops between the frontier and Amman. Kanan and Siam needed to complete the job before the train arrived in Amman, which meant within the next 4 hours. The odds were 2 against 14, a difference of power so great it seemed absurd even to consider a plan of attack.
ザイームの配置ミスだよ、シャム。2人でやる仕事じゃない。うん。あからさまに来るならいっそ爆破すればいい。停車中にセムテックスでも仕掛ければよかったんだ。
explosive, okay.
乱暴だが効率的だな。俺たちの仕事が殲滅ならそれで行きたいところだが。
They had checked the cars pretty thoroughly before they departed. Sneaking something aboard the freight car would probably have been close to impossible.
じゃあどうするの？正面から14人はちょっときついよ。
いや、そんな賭け事をするまでもない。人手なら増える。もう一人ここで合流する予定だ。
え？
Kanan was shocked. She felt an unfamiliar kind of fear. As far as she had known, I guess it's Shiam? Is that how you say it? Shiam never teamed up with anyone but her.
失礼。同席するよ。他の席は男ばかりでどうにも居づらいんでね。
As soon as the stranger spoke, Kanan saw Sham's color shift to a pale, pale blue. A bad sign.
失礼。同席するよ。
Her voice was low. The muscles in her arms like taut. What? The muscles in her arms were like taut, like corded rope. Too many legs in there. To Kanan's eyes, her visage was a complex meld of shifting colors. Without saying, this was their sole reinforcement, their third teammate.
構わない。座ってくれ。
どうも。なあ、場所を譲ってくれないか、お嬢さん。子供は保護者の横に座るものだ。その位置は私向けだろ。シャム、お嬢さんは耳が遠い？それともアラビア語はわからない？
You're not speaking Arabic, though.
カナン、俺の横に座
You
る。
speak Japanese.
彼女は今回の情報提供者で。
It'd be kind of cool if they actually did voice acted in Arabic.
古い馴染みでもある。
She said nothing. But she did get up from her seat and sit next to Sham. She'd do as she asked, although she didn't trust this woman. She didn't like the way he'd said old friend. It brought up all her natural cynicism. Is that supposed to be all part?
シャム、この子がお前のバックアップか？
いや、今回俺はダーファフだ。こいつはシナーン向けだな。腕は水準以上だが、村っ気がありすぎる。目の前に相手がいないと目を覚まさないのでは、守りは任せられる。
それはまだ訓練中というわけか。
Konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum type shit. The woman regarded Kanan with a cold gaze. Japanese people can't even. Well, I'm saying get an air for someone who can. That's what I'm saying. That'd be like. She said, "I'm speaking Arabic." They're speaking Japanese right now. She gave the impression of a snake trying to sense the body temperature of potential prey.
かわいいじゃないか。大抵その左手は人並みに動くのか。訓練途中のお嬢さんは体の管理もできない半人前。
Kanan glared sidelong at that woman. She wasn't She wasn't offended by the remark itself. The fact was that her left arm was still in pain. What unsettled her was this woman's powers of perception, able to detect Kanan's injury through the heavy cloak she wore.
動くよ。少しすりむいただけ。すぐ良くなるし、問題はない。
そう。ならいいが、原因は傷をつけたのは列車に乗る前か乗った後か。それでお前がまだ半人前の兵士か、ただの間抜けかわかるんだ。
Kanan did not reply.
だんまりか。おいシャム、どっちなんだ？
He didn't answer. Had she seen something in that silence?
はあ、そういうこと？
The stranger could read Sham's silence better than anyone, better than his own partner. The woman's stoic face grew just a shade brighter. Her smile was entirely sarcastic, but at least it was a display of human emotion. It was a smile as if to say, well done, as if Kanan's injury were some fated thing.
見たところ戦争孤児か。まったく。懲りないなお前も。仕込みは何年になるんだ？
引 引き受けたのは2年前だ。
2 years ago. 2003, the Middle East, a war orphan. All that information taken together left no question about just what battlefield she'd seen. The Iraq War. She had lived through the long night of a war that for the winning side had been little more than a display of overwhelming resources and overwhelming technology.
安心したよ。半人前だが心構えはあるわけだ。では技術はこれから見させてもらおう。お前が連れてくる以上は一発には鍛えられているだろうしな。
Now that she'd inferred Kanan's background, the woman's enmity seemed to abate. Their initial reluctance to trust each other had apparently been mutual. Kanan wasn't necessarily happy, but if this was the team Shyam wanted, she would accept it. As the woman had observed, Kanan had been trained by Shyam after all, and Shyam's judgment was absolute. Kanan knew him as her instructor and mentor, the ideal soldier, utterly reliable. She turned her gaze away from the woman and looked out the window. The passing scenery drew out her memories of the life she'd lived over the past few years. Let's go. Let's have another flashback. Let's flashback in the flashback. A girl who had lost all her relatives to war, the tale of a child who had never held a gun before, becoming a full-fledged soldier at the heels of a veteran mercenary. All of it came hazily drifting back into her mind. Oh my god, we're actually doing that. Come on. All the life I'd had before was taken away by the war. The echoing of gunfire in the distance, the sound of buildings ablaze. I couldn't help but think of how much smaller and simpler those sounds were than I'd imagined them to be from stories. No place had seemed safer to me than my house, and it was reduced to ruin by a single artillery shell. A few moments after that blast, a group of strange men came barging in. I could hear their heavy footsteps, their coarse voices muttering. They're dead, we've killed them. Luckily for me, my father had been thinking quickly and had sent me into the basement. Unluckily, he and my brothers were still in the living room when the blast hit. It wasn't just the furniture that was now gone without a trace. I sat in the basement thinking. From the men's conversation, I realized that they were looking for my father's corpse, my older brother's, and my own. I can remember every word those soldiers said. Something had clicked in my mind as I listened. I committed to memory how many men there were, what their voices sounded like, what names they called each other, so that I would never, ever forget. Focused on hearing their every word for the next hour, I felt neither fear nor boredom. I gathered that there was no trace of my father's body, but they had found my older brothers. Satisfied, the soldiers left. All of this happened when I was 12 years old. Trapped under the rubble, it was days before I was rescued. I'd lost my family and any place to belong. The adults who found me realized that I'd suffer emotional scarring, but they didn't have the time to bother with that. They're dead, we've killed them. Ah, yes. There are too many things one needs to do in life. In my case especially, I expect I'm going to be overworked. It was quite simple. The reason I took up arms, it was not atonement that I sought, but equal compensation for what I'd lost. Unjust usurpers, deeds whose cost was reckoned in blood. I have still not been paid what I am owed. The balance must be settled. I only ask as much as they took from me. That is why I carry on, never resting, with the relentless precision of a machine. It is simply a tale of sorrow giving way to resentment, giving way to cold reason. Was it odd that I never felt malice? Perhaps I could see too clearly. I could see things on a broader scale than others, could see where the evil was, where the flaws were, could see it all so clearly that I was dumbstruck into sheer objectivity. The weak are evil. My family, my father, people I should have been proud of, had too many flaws. People of conscience, who esteemed a righteous society, who embraced complicated and contradictory things, who tried to become good sheiks? I guess that's a leader, okay? A wise man. Their many failings created enemies, invited war, and brought on their defeats. Violence was a vulgar thing, far beneath the cultured behavior of my father and brother, but it still had the final word over them in the end. We may have been cruel to those who would shame us, yet we have tolerated too many of these foreign invaders. Balance is key. One must clad oneself in complexities, yet be simple at the core. Taking action always requires a first step. If someone takes from you, you take it back. If they kill you, you kill them back. I don't think you can do that. Action and reaction. We should have thought more simply. By perceiving everyone different than ourselves as enemies, we brought on the war long before it was inevitable. Even if my father and brother had been operating in a vacuum, they probably would have done the same. But every family has so many kin to hold dear, so many others who cloud their perspective. Except for me. Ha! My family and my kin are utterly gone. Apart from the determination I already possessed, I knew I needed to hone myself. My growing skills as a soldier were necessary for me to achieve my goals, and more basically, necessary for me to even survive. My goals. In the beginning, that was all I really thought about. Once I'd become an orphan, I resolved not to rely on anyone. My trauma wouldn't let me trust anyone else. And yet, eventually, I wound up feeling a sense of trust for this man who found me and committed 2 years to training me. It was something I'd never thought I'd feel again.
素人を鍛えられるほど気の長い奴はここにはいないそうだ。適任ではないが、お前には俺がつくことになった。
Xiam was always more freelancer than soldier. He belonged to a liberation movement. What is that? Oh. It refers here to the Palestinian Liberation Movement, a political movement formed in response to the conflict arising between... Yep. I know about that. But he made his living taking on jobs as a reliable mercenary. I guess his role gave him a lot of freedom because unlike a grunt who simply fired guns, he was allowed to act as a sort of instructor. He had no close ties within his organization, which was convenient for me. I'd taken up arms not because of any ethnic conflict, but for my own personal cause. Luckily for me, Xiam ignored my unique background and upbringing and simply trained me to be a fighter, growing as an instructor along the way. Oh, shit, I dropped something.
逆を言えば、現在の水準に達していない銃を選んだ者は真っ先に振るい落とされる。お前が初めに覚えることは、手にしたものが良質か粗悪かを測る術であり。
Guns are simple. Not nearly as complicated as people, you just need to pull the trigger. My father had handled weapons occasionally, but never showed me how to use one. Political struggle was his preferred form of conflict, and in the end, it was that bias that defeated him. I took up guns to avoid repeating his mistake, but also the feel of a metal grip in my hand seemed to suit me. At least that was how it always felt to me. Maybe my fondness for weapons was deliberately ingrained into me by Xiam's instruction.
どれほど優れた才能であろうと体格は変えられない。複数の敵と拳銃で撃ち合うときは、最も近くにいる敵に向けて2発撃ち込む。命中していなくても、足指の付け根を軸に向きを変え次の敵を撃て。敵を接近させるな。
I mastered the basics that first year. I say this not out of any excess pride or self-confidence, but I was measurably the best of the soldiers other than Xiam himself. After that, Xiam and I began working jobs together. Xiam was against it at first, but I had the ability, and he at least had the objectivity to acknowledge the fact. He was an exceptional teacher, and I was an even more exceptional student. I was an ideal subordinate, an inhuman combatant willing to use whatever I deemed useful to get an edge. I had countless brushes with death out on the battlefield. The reality of war is that people die regardless of their tech, their experience, their abilities. I ought to have accepted that reality when I lost my family, but it was the battlefield that made the truth completely clear. The society into which I'd been born seeks to assign value not just in monetary terms, but for individual dignity and even ideologies. But only death is truly impartial. I was able to survive through all of this, largely thanks to Xiam's aptitude. He wound up protecting me countless times when my inexperience put me in peril. His intervention was not out of any fondness for me, but rather a cool calculation in the interest of completing the mission. He knew I could be counted on. Never much to look at, he Yeah, accrued even more scars in the course of rescuing his risk-prone student. There was almost no place that he hadn't been shot, except somehow in the head. Maybe there was a trick to that? I'd wanted to ask him secretly, but there was no allowance for questions while he was my shield. I could only make such small talk once his time as my protector had come to an end. And even then, up until this very moment, there'd never been a good time to ask. I just wound up believing that Shiam would never die. That no matter how many times people opened fire on him, he simply wouldn't get hit where it really mattered. That was all probably a delusion on my part, of course, but the fact was that he just didn't die. Of course, his heart had already died sometime before. Bullets couldn't kill someone who was already dead. He deserved my trust. We were of the same breed, he and I. Shiam would always have my back, no question.
稀に超人的な兵士が現れる。この先長く傭兵を続けていれば、そういう旗迷惑なものに出会うだろう。
My training was complete. I was no longer a student, but a mercenary. And this is what Shiam had to tell me? I responded with sarcasm. What was this, some Hollywood script? Shiam had never really joked with me before.
いや、SF ではなく現実の話だぞ。兵士同士の戦闘、個人装備の性能の向上は頭打ちだ。戦場において一個の兵士は均等に死んでいく。次は俺のターン、その次はお前のターンといった風にな。
俺のターン。
だが中にはその平等を覆す怪物がいる。
Shiam went on to tell a story of two soldiers, one wielding a revolver and one an automatic handgun. The wildly anachronistic revolver was no match for the automatic. Even disregarding magazine size, a higher rate of fire meant superior firepower, period. A machine pistol capable of firing 3-round bursts. Would turn the revolver user into Swiss cheese.
リボルバーとオートでは話にならない。それが俺たちの認識であり、同時に兵士としての限界でもある。
Shiam went on, talking about how similar weapons could equalize the abilities of soldiers, and about those who had removed that collar from themselves and deviated from that equilibrium. For instance, the unparalleled gunfighter capable of rapid fire like that seen in a Hollywood western, a type of character who'd actually existed, experts who could fan the hammer unloading 5 shots at a target in the span of a single second. Of course, simple rapid fire alone wasn't worth fearing. It had to be accompanied by the skill to put it on target. Shiam had probably just been trying to offer an explicit example of a time when exceptional human skill could surpass the capabilities of the available hardware. It had all seemed too fantastical, but he had been dead serious. Apparently he'd run across such rule breakers in the past.
生まれついての戦争や重機の申し子、強運の塊、我々とは違う身体の機能、そういったものを持つ超人は稀に現れる。身体機能に天性の差があるのは言うまでもないが、その才能がピタリと戦争に符合する幸運な兵士。戦場でのみ人間の規格から逸脱し、一個の兵士では起こし得ない戦果を上げるもの。
Still, even according to Shiam, such superhuman could only deal with 3 or 4 opponents within any given moment. So assuming you had 5 or more to attack them in that moment, there'd be no problem taking them down. I was relieved. He wasn't talking mere fiction, but he also wasn't just telling some joke. So then what was his story all about?
お前は超人ではないが、極限ではある。それを自ら承知しているのも知っている。だからこそ気をつけろ。5体の境界を誤らず、己の才能に頼るな。お前は完成されている。自分の性能を正しく把握しているのなら、決して破れることはない。
Thus did Shiam acknowledge my ascendance to the status of a warrior. It was an achievement to be proud of, to be seen as his sole peer as a combatant, perhaps even his better. More than anything, the esteem I held for Shiam was a reflection of the esteem he showed me. We were the same. That's why when the time came, I had scarred my left arm. I wanted a physical symbol of our connection. Introductions were simple affairs. Shiam had no need to give his name. Kanan had no interest in the woman's. And the woman seemed satisfied with what she knew of the other
呼び
two.
方はシャムとお嬢さんでいい？
問題がないのならそちらの今の名前は？
ああ、連携は必要だな。
Bruh.
カナンというのはどうだ？
Kanan couldn't suppress a sound of irritation. She tugged wordlessly on Shiam's coat, like a pouting cat, staking a claim to what it wanted for its own.
すまない。それは問題がある。
Shiam replied.
冗談だよ。今は定かで通している。
Sadaka. Refers to the act of giving spontaneous voluntary charity to the needy. Distinct from zakat. Obligatory almsgiving. Okay.
それじゃ、そろそろ本題に入ろうか。
That's Alphard though, right? Pretty sure. Sadaka explained how the job would unfold. They'd wait until the train had traveled for an hour beyond the border before moving against their objective. Hopefully they could finish the mission an hour before their arrival in Amman. Kanan peered at Shiam's face as he and Sadaka spoke. His color was, as always, blue. That shift earlier to an unluckier color, the cloudy whiteness of an unfamiliar stranger, had lasted only for a moment.
目的となる貨物車両は3両目。その前後である第2と第4車両にはそれぞれ7人ずつ護衛が配置されている。うち第4車両の2人は定期的に後部車両の見回りをするようだ。そら、噂をすれば。
Without even shifting her gaze, Kanan could confirm the presence of two soldiers moving through the car in which she sat. The two blue blotches passing by, the color of alert escorts, a rending inorganic blue, the color of firefighters. I'm making words up. The color of fighters skilled in the use of guns that they carried. People who were this color usually rubbed Kanan the wrong way. Just being near them made her uncomfortable. Shiam was a contradictory counterexample. Despite his dangerous hue, he eased her nerves. But whether the colors expressed themselves as painful or gentle didn't mean anything. The colors were merely colors. Whether warm or cold, everything was done neatly in simple colors, as if painted with run-of-the-mill materials.
列車の最後尾は同じく貨物列車だが、こちらに積まれているものは至って健全な物資だ。最悪の場合、ここに籠城できないこともない。まあ、催涙弾の一つでも投げ込まれればおしまいだがね。
いや、交戦は避ける。目撃者も犠牲者も出すなというのがオーダーだろう。
ことは秘密裏に。連中が私たちに気づくのは列車がアンマンに到着し、何もかも立ち去った後か。いいね。それは私の注文通りだ。
では確認する。輸送の真偽は明らかになった。我々の目的はこれの奪還に移行する。変更点は
ない。スポンサーとして同志の行動に期待し、また私もこれに参加する。
It had been just over 5 hours since they'd boarded the train. Kanan felt a sense of relief that at long last the action she'd been anticipating would finally commence. Their objective was to recover the parcel in the freight car toward the front section of the train. They would infiltrate the car without alerting the guards, acquire the payload, and then disembark from the train as if they were just normal passengers. Top priority was acquiring the item, secrecy was secondary. If it turned out that they needed to take the payload by force, they'd been given permission to initiate combat. Violence was definitely on the table, if it came to that. If they were detected, they'd wind up in a 3-on-14 shootout aboard a train.
OK。私とシャムの役割はわかる。けどこの女は何をするんだ。そもそもどうしてスポンサーが出向いてくる。
彼女の専門は暗号破りだ。本来なら別の人間を手配するんだが、急な話だったからな。昨日の時点で合流できる専門職は彼女しかいなかった。
暗号破りって、それなら。
そうすねるな。この道ではこいつは一流だ。お前もいい経験になるさ。
随分とらしくないな、シャム。カナンという子供にほだされたというのは本当だったか。
人一倍手がかかっているだけだが、
An epic amount of trouble.
そんな話が触れ回っているのか。
いいや、我々がカナンという優秀な人材を手に入れたという話ぐらいさ。私もまさかこんなお嬢さんとは思っていなかったが。
私もお前みたいな女がスポンサーとは知らなかった。知ってたら2年もいなかった。
それは違うな。私は多くの支援者のうちの一人だよ。指導者じゃない。だいたい一紛争に本腰を入れるほど暇じゃないんだ。
そのくせこんな仕事に顔を出してるじゃないか。
別件で近くに来ていてね。そのついでだよ。今回はネタがネタだし、無視するわけにもいかんだろう。
すればよかったのに。こんなの私とシャムだけで十分だ。
The enmity between the two had become like a steady rhythm, driving along their conversation. It did make them interesting to listen to, for better or for worse.
定か、その別件とは何か問題でも。
ほう。
Kanan was intrigued. Shion wasn't the kind of person to ask irrelevant questions. Had he twigged something that might affect the mission? Whatever the case, Sadaka smiled pleasantly.
プロジェクトの一つに問題が出てきてね。人材の調査と兵器の不具合の2点だ。そうだな。例えば、お前が懐に飲んでるものは殺傷能力が高い武器という触れ込みだが、当たったのに効果がないとクレームがあったとしたらどうだ？
何それ。そんなの不具合どころの話じゃない。れっきとした欠陥商品じゃないか。
ああ、その通りだお嬢さん。今まで信頼していたものに欠陥があったでは我々の信頼に関わる。無視してもいい不安要素なんだが、取り除けるなら取り除いた方が商品になるからね。現地に行って問題点とやらを確認し、しかるべき対処法を提出する。つまらない仕事さ。近頃はこんな駒遣いばかりだ。コードブレーカーならぬリスクブレーカーというところか。
そう。偉そうにしてるけど、誰かの駒遣いなのは変わらないんだ。
まったくだ。
Sadaka brushed aside Kanan's insult with an air of confidence. Kanan scowled. The woman was so sure of herself. She turned away and gazed out at the scenery outside, and then she realized the snack she'd been gnawing on was gone.
シャム。
今日は多いな。そんなに不満か？
シャム、話の途中だが少しいいか？
簡潔に済むのなら。
ああ、さっきから気になっていたんだが、お前の相棒は何を食べ
Yeah, what is that? I want to know.
新手の携帯食か？
そんなものだ。試すか？
Without saying anything, Sadaka took one of the offered treats. She tore open the paper wrapper on one end and stuck the contents between her teeth like a cigarette, just as Kanan had. Kanan watched her resentfully, knowing what she was tasting. A simple, unpretentious sweetness, the purity of concentrated sugar.
ではなく、そのもの
It's just a sugar stick, I guess,
ただ
okay?
の砂糖じゃないかこれ。
ああ、シュガースティックを固めたものだ。乾燥して固形化したものを見つけて以来、大のお気に入りでな。今じゃ注射器を使って固形化している。品質で言うなら日本製のものがいいそうだ。
Kanan focused on knowing her own stick, not really listening to Shyam's explanation. There was a brief silence. Sadaka let out a sullen sniff.
変わった思考だな。うまいのか？
うん。無駄がないのはすごく美味しい。
Sadaka raised an eyebrow dubiously. The time had come. They had got up from their seats without a sound. Draped in their hoods, Kanan and Sadaka made their way through the train, doing their best to draw no attention. Shiama put together a timeline. Alright, so they should spend no more than 30 minutes at most on their infiltration. In addition to the soldiers stationed in the passenger cars, it was possible that the enemy also had lookouts disguised as normal passengers. A seat left open for too long might arouse unwanted suspicion. The team needed to sneak into the freight car, obtain the payload, and return to their seats without a single minute wasted. Shiam was too tall and muscular to be well suited for the infiltration. He would hang back and act as the girl's rear guard, and if the operation was discovered, his task would be to secure an escape route for them.
最後尾についた時計の合わせを。
She and Kanan prepared to make their way to their final objective in the freight car up ahead. Despite their clashing personalities, they moved almost like twins as they went about their work. It was evidence that their training had instilled them with similar priorities.
確認するが、携帯しているのはベレッタと断層だけか。
お前こそ銃はそれだけでいいのか。
ああ。戦闘になった場合、迎撃はお前に任せる。今回の私の仕事は暗号破りだ。接続用の PC と護身用に一丁あればいい。
Both of them were going in with a minimal loadout. As a covert agent in enemy territory, that made Kanan uneasy, but then, if a fight did break out here, the mission was already a partial failure. The organization couldn't spare equipment for a team that only needed it if they fouled things up.
お嬢さん、ルートの確認は？
ルートそのものは問題ない。いいの？これ頭脳労働じゃないよ。
専門外だが、その程度のリスクは多さ。それなりに経験もある。お前は乗り物酔いはするタイプ。
Are you okay? Is everything okay down there?
暴れ馬には慣れてるし、動くものから落ちたことも。
I haven't had Chipotle in years.
上等。勇ましいね、お嬢さん。では、サーカスの始まりだ。
Should I get my adult diaper? Oh my god! Oh. The garb that the two girls wore under their cloaks was quite different from the norm for Middle Eastern women. Aside from the fact that they wore red and the other black, their outfits were rather similar. Both of them had dressed for maximum freedom of movement.
潜入経路に問題はない。行動を開始する。
Without the casual air of a traveler going for a stroll, and without any hesitation whatsoever, she headed for the outside of the train. No problems with the she just said that. The call cut out. From here on, the team would retain radio silence except in cases of emergency. As the girls back up, Shiam had to decide on a course of action. He could try making his way through the inside of the train, heading straight toward the sequestered freight car. It would make him obvious, but that would at least draw the guards' attention onto him for a time. He had no intention of trying to get into the freight car itself, of course. His goal would be simply to draw the guards' eyes. He could claim to be on his way to meet a friend. The guards would be sure to intercept him and try to usher him away from the freight car. While that was going on, Kanan and Sadaka would hopefully be able to sneak inside. But it seemed that wasn't going to be an option. There were no ordinary passengers in the cars where the guards were posted. If the things they were protecting was what Shiam thought it was, these guards would be good. Any unusual action he took would provoke them and only heighten their alertness. He didn't want to do anything to complicate things for the girls. He decided that his best course of action was just to stay ready in case things went bottoms up. He checked the gun he'd hidden at his feet. Then he pictured in his mind the guards in the nearest compartment, their builds, their gear, their positions. Veteran fighter though he was, he could think of no good way to make up for the sheer difference in numbers. If a fight did break out, it would still be 1 against 7. To break through an enemy position held by soldiers who knew what they were doing, he'd have to completely abandon his own better judgment. Why is there a beta symbol? What is it? He was reminded of a story he'd heard or he'd been told as a student, a fable involving a board game. Life was represented by the board. There was a clear, defined endpoint. One proceeded toward that end, but dire pitfalls had been set up on the way to the goal. It was a valuable lesson. One shouldn't have a goal in life, or rather one shouldn't think of the end as the goal. The proper way to live one's life was to realize it was already over. One must focus on the moment. This game of striving for the goal, for the end, that was just a way of rushing headlong towards one's death. The priorities were backwards. One shouldn't have a goal in life. One shouldn't seek meaning in oneself, to seek reward, to seek proof that you'd live by achieving some hypothetical endpoint. That was a fool's game. Shyam's ability to live without hunting for such proofs was one of the very few things on which he prided himself as a mercenary. Slipping his gun out of its hiding place, Shyam narrowed his eyes slightly. Until now, he had been a lone soldier, put to use however his employers deemed necessary. He held no tenets, no opinions. He acknowledged that he was an instrument of war. He acknowledged that this was an age where such instruments were necessary. How many battlefields had he passed through? He could see no value in trying to sum up such experience with some complex, ever-shifting philosophy. There were those who would wage war and those who would try to end it, and tools were necessary for both of those ends. That was all the justification a soldier required. Warriors fought, and then they don't give him a backstory. There is no room for anything resembling a normal life. That's who they were, demons, not men. To Shyam, to this mercenary, this was a simple fact. Back in my day, his watch showed that 6 minutes had passed, 24 minutes ago. By then, they would all know if they had failed or succeeded. It was too long and yet too short, a gulf of time for him to fill with his own rusting memories. No. Okay, fine. He had been born into an age of enduring conflict. 1948, the first Arab-Israeli war, was started with the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel. Over 800,000 displaced Arab refugees, a conflict between those who had formed their own nation at the end of their wandering and those who would now never be able to return to those lands. 1956, the tri-party aggression over the Suez Canal. Any attempts at negotiation or diplomacy were ineffective. The Middle Eastern hegemony shifted into the hands of two nations, further deepening the turmoil. And in 1964, Palestinian Liberation Organization was formed to retake its founder's rightful homeland, his homeland. 4 years prior, he'd been born in a region west of the Jordan River. Like the other young men of faith who had thrown themselves into the liberation movement, he too had chosen the path of belief. But his beliefs were too rigid, too severe. He did not know or value compromise. He'd learned to focus on what he could accomplish as a soldier, and strove to become one of the elite, in order to end the fighting as soon as possible. He believed that this was the very best that he could do. The organization he joined in his teens was small, but it had affiliated itself with the PLO, then joined up with the Gaddafi? Is that how you say it? Gaddafi? Camp, which had provided its members the necessary soldiers' education. Infighting, however, gradually reduced the organization's numbers. He'd used the '82 Lebanon War as his opportunity to temporarily distance himself from the PLO, and had thrown himself instead into fighting in Afghanistan. That was when he'd acquired the name Shyam. He'd acted as a military instructor for the Islamic volunteer soldiers from Thailand. Okay. His students had bestowed upon him the former name of their kingdom. A new name. And when he accepted this new moniker, something that represented something other than himself, he had ceased to be the young man who'd sacrificed himself for his ideals. At the request of some former acquaintances, he'd returned to the PLO in 1990. Yet again, infighting had brought the organization to the brink of collapse, and he'd been tasked with helping to restructure it. It was around then that he'd reached his current standing. The sub-organization that he belonged to was in dire financial straits, and so to keep it solvent, its members had begun taking on mercenary contracts for covert ops from the PLO and Islamic extremist groups that were former affiliates. He'd been a soldier for over 30 years. Through all that time, he had fought and he had survived. The fighting had honed him on every level. Much of it had been purely mercenary, to secure funding to keep his organization afloat, but he recognized that as being meaningful in its own way. In order to tip the balance in the fighting within their own country, his compatriots needed to encourage other nations to go for each other's throats. Accepting this as the evil that it was, they continued to wield the hammer of justice. Eventually, he had seen so much that he no longer felt the evil, and then he no longer even felt the justice. Ever the consummate soldier, he was too grounded in harsh reality to deceive himself with flowery words or abstract ideas. Everything that he truly understood, he'd come to realize while on the battlefield. And one thing had become completely clear. The fighting that raged through his homeland would not end during the lifetimes of his generation. His own existence was nothing more than a blip on the battle radar, a tiny detail in the midst of something vastly larger than himself. Bit by bit, his once rigid faith gave way to something more nihilistic. Times changed, and so did values. At some point, the human heart went on to change as well. His changed convictions left him alienated, and he reformed himself into a solitary soldier. He longed for battle, yet felt no commitment to any particular conflict. And so, despite his legendary record and uniform, he became a mercenary outside the military establishment. His compatriots began to view him as nothing but a warmonger, who fought without beliefs, and they were not so far from wrong. No longer a true partisan of any cause, what he was much harder to define. Ultimately, he was a jack of all trades. Recruit training, guarding VIPs, intelligence operations, subversive activities, he tackled them all. One thing led to another, until he arrived at the last major job he'd undertaken as a soldier. The theater was the Iraq War. There was a battle on the fringes unrelated to the main conflict itself. And there he found a girl who had lost everything, her kin and community all victims of collateral damage. The tragedy that struck her had unfolded in a single day. When Xiam found her, a chance discovery as he was making his way through the area, it was a miracle that she was even breathing. According to the reports, the entire population of the village had been annihilated. Friend or foe, there were no possible survivors, and yet Xiam had found one. He had taken on this war that included aiding any civilians once the fighting was over, even if he knew it was someone unlikely to last much longer than another day. And yet, in defiance of his expectations, the girl clung desperately to life. She pulled herself back from the brink of death, pieced her broken psyche back together, and declared that she wanted to live. Easier said than done. This child had no relatives, and all records of her family had been wiped out. In order for her to live, she would need to be reborn as a soldier.
素人を鍛えられるほど気の長い奴はここにはいない。適任ではないが、お前には俺がつくことになった。
Perhaps because something fascinated him about this new responsibility, he took on the task. To say that the girl wasn't soldier material would have been an understatement. On a scale of 1 to 10, she was less than a 0. Her personality was an issue. She was whimsical, unable to keep her emotions in check, and incapable of working as part of a cohesive unit. Her general knowledge and awareness of local customs were also sadly lacking. She could read and write, but there was something fundamentally broken about how she processed information. She called the sun blue. At first, Xiam figured that she'd simply been taught the word blue to refer to what most people acknowledged as yellow. It wasn't long before he was disabused of this notion. The girl wasn't wrong, everyone else was. What? The things she said weren't untrue from her perspective. To her, the sun did look blue. She was still able to distinguish the color yellow from the color blue the same as anyone else. What are they trying to say? But she had a very peculiar condition. Very rare, but known to humankind for centuries. Is that real? I've heard of it. I've heard of it, but is that like actually real? Synesthesia? She was just like us, except in how she perceived the world. Words would become to her as shapes, sounds as smells, moods as colors. Didn't like Beethoven or some composer have synesthesia or something? It's real, yeah. I've never met anybody with it. That means it's not real. I'm just like taken aback by that. It seems so crazy. Words would come to her as shapes, sounds as smells, and moods as colors. It had isolated her within her own village and thereby saved her life. That isolation was also why she had no initial aptitude for soldiering. She struggled to work within an organization, as those around her struggled to understand how she operated in a group environment. Shiam had no doubt she was the only soldier he'd ever trained who could make eye contact with another person. That is a fucking run-on sentence. If you take acid repeatedly for a long period of time, you will likely induce it. Damn, I gotta try that. That seems like a good idea. Hold on. Let me read this long-ass sentence. Shiam had no doubt she was the only soldier he'd ever trained who could make eye contact with another person and instantly understand where they fell short, and what she could do to make up for it. Running her in a standard squad was almost impossibly difficult. Okay, when you say that, then I gotta do it. I can smell her boobies with my eyes, dude. Shiam soon found that he often needed to give his new novice undivided attention. In terms of trained reactions and physical skills, there was nothing more that he could teach her. She'd mastered shooting and all the fundamentals of his standard physical training. And yet she was still an astoundingly timid girl, afraid of the battlefield, afraid of guns, afraid of the trigger. She even seemed afraid of loading a magazine. Every day, Shiam found himself thinking she wasn't cut out for this. But every day, she threw herself back into the training, facing all the things she feared. Revenge, she began to suspect. No doubt she wanted the ability to fight so that she could strike back at the nameless bunch who had taken her village and her family away from her. She wants to be like me, Shiam thought. She wanted to kill. The murdering lolly, yeah. She's just a machine. She wanted the strength to be able to kill and then immediately to put that killing behind her. She was still a respectable human being, not a soldier. He and she were cut from different cloth. Realizing that made him wonder if there was anything he could truly teach her. She wanted it, that much was clear. And while she might never make much of a rank and file soldier, there were better things for her to do than learn regulations and squad tactics. She could survive best on her own. Away from the conventional battlefield, she began to achieve startling results on extreme solo missions. The more skilled her opponent, the more she rose to the challenge. She was a natural-born duelist. No, that wasn't quite right. The girl was an assassin. Shiam had to admit that she improved each and every day. The almost daily change of pace was good for him too as a teacher. The only problem was the source of her motivation. She fell into her typical sullen silence, a scolded child, unwilling to tell a lie. Inwardly, Shiam acknowledged his misstep and judgment. She might have the makings of the perfect assassin, but the assassin's life would never be a good fit for her. Maybe there were no more physical skills to teach her, but he still needed to give this girl the mental training a warrior required to survive. That lesson, more an admonishment, was the one thing he'd held on to in the wake of his own disillusionment. His heart bore scars that would never heal. Revenge was a prize without reward. Claiming it could break you if your heart was made of anything less than steel. And so he told her to harden her heart into something that could not be broken. He only hoped it was enough. Even steel wore away over time, bit by bit. A year had passed since then. A year that felt like a day. Now one thing in particular rose in his mind. Before this job, for perhaps the first time ever, Kanan had asked him for something. She wanted a tattoo just like his. He'd had no choice but to agree. There had still been one day to go before the job, so they'd gotten it done on location before boarding the train. The tattoo, a snake, represented bad luck and loneliness to the locals. She didn't care. She saw in it a kindred spirit, a creature driven by the same nothingness that fueled herself and Shyam. The timid girl and the black snake. If he gave himself over to sentiment, he might have said that the black snake looked somewhat uncomfortable there, coiled on this arm of this girl bent on survival. Alright, present day, let's go. I guess this is technically the past. Kanan and Sadaka slithered silently along the underside of the train, suspended just above the ties hurtling past beneath them. The slightest mistake in whoever made it would be instantly reduced to an unrecognizable smear of meat. She was taking point. Kanan silently complied. She concealed her foul mood, but not so well that Sadaka couldn't see it. Clearly she didn't like her chosen route.
そっちよりはマシだけど、お前は嘘ばっかりだ。こんなの全然サーカスじゃない。
What the fuck is this? Upbeat music. Sadaka let out an appreciative chuckle. Had the little princess been expecting some more elegant means of reaching their target?
これで満足できないようじゃ。あとはキングコングになるしかないな。
King of Kong.
お前、エンパイアステートビルとか大好きだろ。
知らないけど、なんかすごいバカにしてるでしょ、お前。
もちろん。いや、その無駄口が嬉しくてね。常時おしゃべりなのは目障りだが、こういう状況で余裕があるやつは退屈しなくていい。
Kanan furrowed her brow. She might not ever find it in herself to like Sadaka, but it did seem like they shared a very quirky sense of humor. The doors to the freight car were shut with combination locks. It seemed like an outdated technology for protecting the classified material the car was carrying. Evidently, the enemy had been forced to make use of what they had available. Sadaka quickly punched in a numerical sequence and the lock opened. She had acquired the code sequence before arriving on the train. Due diligence for a code breaker. Sadaka said as they stepped into the car.
何人かいると思ったんだが、セキュリティに自信があるのか、それともトップが間抜けなのか。
The break-in had been disappointingly easy. They surveyed the freight car's interior, still anticipating a further challenge. The space was divided into two compartments. One was sealed and held the item they were after, while the other, in which they now stood, housed a console room for managing the first.
監視窓から確認できるな。目的はあれだ。物自体は小さい。もともとはフォートデトリック製のものだよ。それを秘密裏にイラク派遣された米軍生物戦実験部隊からイスラエル側のモサドが受け取ったんだそうだ。話によると、最終的にはケース台のものに収納されたということだが。
じゃあ、このドアを壊してあのケースも壊す？
壊さないよう私が呼びつけられたんだが。 こいつを運び込んだスタッフのようにさも普通に中に入りケースを開け、誰に咎められることもなく運び出すのが理想だ。ああ、お前は休んでいていい。そっちの仕事は護衛がいた時の梅雨払いだからな。ここからは私の領分だ。
領分って。
いや、持参している。しかしなんだな、予想以上に頭が痛い。この無造作に放り出されたケーブル、何の笑い話だ。どうやって話を楽しみにしていた私がバカみたいだ。どこぞのネットカフェかここは。
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was still going with that. Talk about headache. Oh, is this someone says I have a joke? I was looking forward to a challenge, but this is a low budget internet cafe level. Zeka grumbled as she hooked up her laptop. The security here was laughable, even considering how much of a rush the enemy had been in to arrange this weapon transfer. It looked like she'd need to do a little more than input the password the sheik had given her into the terminal.
まったく、なんて危機感のなさだ。信じられない。それでもイスラエルの人間か。おい、名誉のために言っておくが、イスラエルの IT 技術者は優秀なんだぜ。なんだってこんなバカどもと取引するんだ、米軍は。まさか同じレベルのアホなのか。
うるさいな。お前ペンティアム M とか大好きだろ。
Okay.
嫌いなものか。イスラエルの技術者は世界で一番クールだ。
Ichiban Kuda. Kanan frowned. She might be loath to admit it, but their opinions were very similar. They're like two sides of the same coin. The PC booted up. Sadaka logged into the terminal and entered the password. She worked with a skill and alacrity that would have made any codebreaker
ハッキン
proud.
グなんてものは参加した時点で終わっているようなものだ。その場で暗号を破るなんて職業がまかり通ったのは大昔の話でね。端的に言ってソーシャルハッキングに勝るセキュリティ解除はない。
ソーシャルハッキングってなんだ。
ああ、探偵のようなものだよ。 PC の知識、プログラムテクニック以外の手段で情報を手に入れることだ。セキュリティに関して一番詳しいのは当事者だからな。交渉、内定、果てはゴミ漁りまでやる。今回こいつのセキュリティに関わっていたのは3人だけだったからな。まあ楽な方だ。通常はこのレベルの機密なら10人以上の関係者全員からキーを取らないと難しいと。おい、さっきのあれよこせ。口寂しくなってきた。
Kanan frowned but handed her a sugar stick. This is my last one.
じゃあ暗号破りっていうのは名前だけ？私みたいにその場で答えだけ探すってことじゃないの？
何の話だそれは。私が言っているのは単に人間の方がハックしやすいって話だ。そりゃ答えそのものを手に入れるのが理想だが、まずありえない。それにソーシャルハッキングも数値を埋める行為だぞ。調べ上げた感情や性格、経歴を数値化しないと解は得られない。その後手に入れた情報を整理し、公理に基づいてパスコードを導き出す。
She'd unlocked the third layer of security as she spoke. There was the access password, an infrared scanner lock, and then a lock linked up to the wheels of the train that prevented the compartment door from being opened while the train was in motion.
よし、終わりだ。こいつはまだ試作品だからな。一研究員の個人名でログインできる。あとは研究リーダーのアカウントで管理者権限を。何？
どうしたの？
パスコードが変えられている。
Uh-oh.
だ。優先順位の高いものから打ち込んだが3つとも外れた。
じゃあこの1時間後っていうのは
？1時間パスコード入力を拒否されている。残った手持ちのコードに正解があるとしても 入力そのものができなくなった。
They're running out of time. Already 15 minutes had passed since they begun the operation, maybe? Allowing for 5 minutes to get back to Shyam's car. They only had 10 or so minutes left to work.
積み込む前に気まぐれでコードを変えたな。管理がずさんなら
Classic.
ずさんか。聞いてないぞそんな話は。
珍しく感情的だね。
そうだな。パスによるアクセスはできない。となるとロックを解除する信号を直接送るしかないが、それこそありえない。信号自体は暗号化された上でプログラムに収納されているが、その数値から信号を拾い上げるのは不可能だ。
それプログラム自体は開けられる？
可能だが意味がない。
いいから面白そうだし、ちょっと変わってよ。
わかったか。この数値の中から信号を拾い上げるのは不可能だ。
My synesthesia.
あ、
Activate.
信号ってきっとこれだ。 1898-C455-589312B-C367-AB29 これでやってみて。
だと
当たった？当たりならあの中のものは私のだけど。
She's surprised. She should have been happy. The first stage of her job was finished after all. Still.
共感覚。お前がそう呼ばれる人間なのは資料で読んだ。今のはつまりそういうことか。
別に珍しいものじゃない。単に文字に色がついて見えるだけの話。目とか耳とかが一緒なだけだよ。
それで済ませる話か。私の認識が甘かったようだ。今のお前の行為は直感だけに頼って。
I mean, they were all red, so. Synesthesia. A curious condition found in people all over the world to varying degrees. It was defined as the tendency to experience the stimulation of one sense with additional perceptions in one or more other senses. Human beings have 5 senses. Do they? Sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. People who process 2 or more of these individual senses simultaneously are known as, how do you say it? Synesthetes? Synesthetes? Letters could have colors. Sounds might have shapes. A word might taste sweet or sour. There are many variations, each a unique way to perceive the world. The condition was not generally an impairment. A letter's color could have real meaning. There was a reason that each sound had its particular shape. Synesthetes picked up on this additional sensory information not intellectually but intuitively. It went beyond vision and hearing, simply working as a combined sense. It created a new form of perception in its own right. It seems so wild to me. I can't imagine. The senses themselves didn't literally fuse into one, of course. For synesthetes, the 5 senses could... I don't know about you, but this air freshener is giving purple. The 5 senses could complement each other. I can't pronounce that word. Reciprocate. For instance, visual information might also be processed as sound and then combined with direct auditory input. Visual cues that were also seen through the other senses could radically increase the seer's ability to comprehend what they were perceiving. A typical image on a page serves as a good example. The ordinary person perceives such an image solely through the sense of sight. Yes, a single input, a single level of perception. A synesthete, however, might perceive the same image with 1 or more additional senses as well. Information obtained this way is analyzed by the brain, the secondary perceptions complementing and deepening the information provided by the primary sense. The human brain, however, cannot fully grasp such perceptions on a logical level. In the end, the beneficiary of such experiences simply knows what has been perceived without knowing the reason why. It is akin to the experiences of a newborn child. The child has not yet learned language, and so it struggles to grasp its mother's intent when she speaks. An entity without intellect exerts all of its physical self to learn of its surroundings. The nascent brain has not yet separated the language cortex and the visual cortex. This fucking feels like a... Zero escape tangent. And an infant both function as the same thing. Once those features do become separate, knowledge as we know it first comes into play. The organization of knowledge in different regions of the cerebral cortex efficiently reduces certain burdens on the brain, but at the cost of reducing sensory acuity. Seeing the big picture, understanding the details simply by feeling, not following an ordered thought process but arriving at its conclusion in a single step. Such possibilities might include picking out the meaning of a sequence of digits that appears meaningless at first glance. For one who did not know, intellectually, what part of a tree was the leaves and what part was the trunk, it would still be possible to tell them apart based on their different colors, their different shapes. Junpei, have you heard about the Titanic sister ship? The simplification of things. Have you ever heard of a Funyarimpa? The condension of stories, instinctually understanding solutions without having to follow some process of oh my god, I cannot read. Derivation. This was how a synesthete like Kanan perceived the world.
それを表現する言葉を持たなくても違う表現、色や形でそれが何であるかを読み取れると。
Japan would ship the Titanic with her sister. Is there a Titanic anime? If not, I have the perfect idea. If the text was as a whole contained some story, the programmer's intent was there in the cipher. She could pick up on it in those colors and flavors, feel the touch of that meaning on her skin. Whatever that gacha with bat... Oh yeah, that is true. He's probably there. Because of her very nature, Kanan could look at a sequence of unknown information and immediately sense which parts were important. She had learned to accept that she couldn't understand the why behind it. Her synesthesia is fucking evolving?
共感覚は先天的なものだというからな。お前の場合、何らかの後遺症で共感覚が強くなったのか。
Titanic Chan.
それはつまり
The war. The faculties, or her faculties, hadn't improved through random happenstance. Perhaps when she was on the brink of death, some of her bodily functions had broken in order to keep her alive and had somehow changed while she recovered.
皮膚感覚の優れた生き物は波で周囲の情報を測るというが、お前の感覚はそれに近いと。
近いのかな。そんなのは知らないけど、その気になれば周りぐらいは見て取れる。
では、今私が何をしているかわかるか？
うん。肩をすくめているのが匂いで見える。
I can see the scent, Sadaka thought. So that's what using your whole body to perceive things is like. This girl had eyes pointing in every direction. She was a veritable sensory prodigy. She had no blind spots. Her ears and nose, her tactile sensations saw on every side at once.
確固たる直感。人間が知識という武器の代わりに失った第六感という才能。
Maybe it wasn't so remarkable after all. It was something all human creatures had once possessed, an early gift, taken away from them by the serpent of primal knowledge. What the fuck? Progress, not regression, had caused mankind this capability. Sometimes true evolution necessitated the loss of some superior power in order for a species to thrive. Humans had grown more complex through language, culture, and thought, the only creatures on Earth to distance themselves from their animal nature. And what was it they had lost? The trick of knowing only answers at a look? What? The trick of knowing only answers at a look? That's a really weird sentence. To receive an answer without looking, or without thinking, that was nothing more than the abandonment of thoughts. You're a knuckle dragger. Sadaka smirked inwardly at the thoughts. This girl was such a simple creature. No wonder Shyam's edge had dulled from having to deal with us. Sudden sound of the radio snapped her back to attention. They had under 5 minutes left to go.
問題ない。少しばかり予定が狂ったが、お嬢さんのおかげで解決した。
そうか、急げ。こちらも雲行きが怪しい。護衛による乗客晒しが始まった。スパイ容疑だそうだ。引き延ばせて2分だぞ。
は、こっちではいつものことだよ。了解。リンチが始まる前には戻る。やはり携帯できる形だったな。中に物があるのは端末から確認済みだ。お嬢さん、かさばるがそのケースごと運んでくれ。ああ、決して開けるなよ。万が一ということもある。下手をすれば、ここら一帯死の土地だ。
なんだって。シャム、聞き忘れてた。今回の獲物は何？
It's the virus.
現在最も小さく凶悪な兵器の一つだ。
His brave silence, but Kanan already knew what his words implied. A chill ran up her spine. She could feel the latent threat before her now.
シャム、これは。
米国疾病予防管理センター格付け最優先リスクグループ4。秘密裏に散布感染実験を行い性能を立証した致死性ウイルス。その遺伝子を組み換え、兵器としての運用効率を高めたウーアプロとの奪還が。
That is Uwa, that is how you say it. That was it. That was the name of that fragment of hell that had brought ruin to her life 2 years earlier. Uwa, a microscopic demon, released by mankind. It was the year 2000. A retrovirus awoke in the Drakensberg region of South Africa. Deforestation, carried out in the name of advancing national development, unleashed the pathogen upon the land, rapidly infecting a local village. That's awful. The virus's combination of a high lethality rate and a high infection rate wiped out the entire village in a matter of days. The South African government carried out radical sterilization procedures, burning down the forests in a several kilometer radius. Luckily, the virus was still vulnerable and the sterilization effort proved successful until 3 years later, when agents from another nation collected samples of the virus from the same woodlands and began research on military applications. They improved the virus and successfully created a weaponized prototype. The demon awoke. They chose a village already engulfed in the flames of war as a test site. Under cover of the conflict in Iraq, the weapon makers carried out their experiments, the virus was unleashed, and the village vanished. The lethality rate was over 90%, the infection rate and survivability of the pathogen both exceptionally high. This was the tiny demon, invisible to the naked eye, that had taken everything from the young girl called Kanan. After that, there were rumors of further development. The improved form of the virus was given the name Uwa, and the prototype that had destroyed that nameless Middle Eastern village was frozen. Yes, frozen. Not disposed of, not eradicated. The weapon was difficult to use, but those who possessed it still felt that there was value even in the inferior prototype. Furthermore, it represented a great deal of research money, which meant whoever it might be, should a buyer emerge, they would sell. Kanan had no words. I thought she was going to fly off the handle. Why was this thing here now? She felt nothing, no grief, rage, or despair. She simply thought calmly, someone is still alive who is willing to use this weapon. That includes the soldiers who are here to protect it. She spoke. She moved mechanically, removing the case from its compartment. Whatever free will she'd possessed a moment before had vanished. Sadako watched her, satisfied. Then both girls stiffened with alarm. A message appeared on the monitor. Case connection broken. Security breach possible. If disconnection is unresolved after 60 seconds, alert broadcast will commence. The call was brief, and the conclusion was clear. The parameters of the job had changed. A fight was unavoidable. They would need to strike first. Sadako, fuck you. You did this. For the time being, Kanan and Sadako were trapped. There were 7 hostiles ahead of them and 7 more behind. All the girls could do now was set up in the freight car to buy themselves time. And yet,
オーケー。みんな黙らせていいんだよね。
what was that? She cut the connection. Her eyes gleamed with menace. This was no time for hesitation. This was time for battle.
一人呆れたな。腕に自信があるのはいいが現実的じゃない。シャムほどとは言わないが近い兵士が7人だぞ。
分かっている。でもそいつらはシャムじゃない。
Kanan was all action. There was no room for emotion. She'd analyzed her problem and now she was going to solve it.
勝手に死なれるのは困る。お前は組織にとって貴重なサンプルなんだが、まあそれも枝葉の話か。
It was clear that conversation wasn't going to be a thing right now. The gleam in Kanan's eyes was that of a beast on the hunt.
ケースをこちらにシャムに届ける。奴との連携は慣れているからな。うまく攻撃してさっさと終わらせるさ。
Maybe at the end, we'll have to see. I don't think that's gonna happen. Near as she could see, Sadaka's words didn't have the color of a lie. She was a codebreaker forced by the situation to fight.
落とすのよ。あとシャムの邪魔をしないよう気をつけろ。
そちらもな。意地を張らず怖くなったら逃げ出してこい。
She could smell combat. The sound of the wheels and the color of the wind were now both a frigid blue.
こうなるんだったらあんなやついらなかった。
Sadaka's color bothered her far more than that of the forthcoming slaughter. Shiam murmured. The car had devolved in the chaos. Guards barked out orders forbidding anyone to leave their seats. They brandished their guns as they interrogated one traveler after another. The passengers were quaking with fear. While the train was passing through a country, the local government had held police authority on board. Ugh. The soldiers bullying the passengers were Jordanian, Shiam could tell, having come aboard during the freight car rearrangement. He counted them among the 14 hostiles. It was only a matter of time before they realized that Kanan and Sadaka were no longer in their seats. Yajimeruka. Shiam let out a sigh of resignation. He's so cool. Now things were getting interesting. Shiam walked wordlessly toward the front of the train. It was clear that wherever he went, death would follow. The other passengers scrambled toward the back of the car. No chance for another surprise attack this time. These soldiers were already ready for combat. They pulled the trigger as soon as they had a target. It was 1 against 6 now. If he played this by the book, Shiam wouldn't stand a chance. Rule 1 was always shoot from cover. It was the first lesson he taught his students. Thing was, you don't have cover. Or that. Rules were made to be broken. So much for playing it by the book. Fastening the top button of his custom bulletproof coat, he strode forward. I am a wall. Walls feel no pain. He opened the door. Bullets ricocheted all around. He cased his enemies, assessed their firepower. He might get injured, but he was confident he wouldn't go down. Right now, there were only 2 guards in the dining car ahead. Time to improvise. Why is he joking? Barging in on dinner like this, where are my manners? His innards were hurting, his bones creaked, but he fought to keep his arm steady, or his aim steady. He had some internal bleeding, but nothing he couldn't power through. This guy's insane. He took another step forward. Reckless maybe, but if he didn't deal with these before reinforcements came, well, no point worrying about that now. Not when there were people left to kill. And just like that, he was down to 3. The worst was yet to come, and his body would bear the brunt of it. Still, Shiam was unafraid. He was dead from the beginning. a walking corpse. He traded his courage, his passion, for an emptiness without fear. He's like a weapon of mass destruction. Kanan's heart beat in time with the blaring alarm, but her mind was clear. With mechanical coolness, she considered her orders and the time she had available to carry them out. She inferred the positions of her 7 targets, assessed the potential for a strategy that could overcome 7-to-1 odds, and picked her moment. This she did by instinct. Kanan didn't need to think. She let the hard soles of her shoes slap down on the roof of the train car as she ran. That should get their attention. The soldiers sprang into action. One of the gangway doors opened. As the leading guard stepped through, a red-clad figure flashed into view on the roof of the adjacent car, her hair streaming in the wind as the train raced along at 80 kilometers an hour. She fired twice. Her trigger control was flawless, aided by the lightweight slide and short recoil operation of her Beretta. One instant, 2 targets, right between the eyes. It should have been 3. The strike should have worked. But she only got 2. I failed. She'd misled her shot at improving her odds to 4-to-1. Or maybe instead of blaming herself, she owed her enemies some respect. They moved well. At this rate, failure was just a matter of time. She didn't have the firepower to go up against 5 well-armed opponents head-on. At the moment, they were on equal footing, both sides cowering under cover. She'd never been able to pick them off. She'd never be able to pick them off one by one. But sooner or later, the soldiers would realize that they could lay down enough suppressive fire to force her to stay down while someone rushed to her position. And if she tried to rush them instead, the instant she emerged from behind her seat, she'd fall victim to a hail of bullets. Kanan sighed. For the moment, it was a stalemate. She couldn't see the enemy and they couldn't see her. But then she heard one of the soldiers. The guards were using hand signals, but Kanan could perceive them as sounds. Her eyes were red. Oh! The vibration of the guards' movements, the sound of breathing, the scent of gunpowder. That was enough. They weren't on equal footing anymore. Her 5 heightened senses melded into a single potent awareness. The enemy was on her turf now. The angle of the floor and walls, the strength and positioning of the wooden seats, the humidity of the air, subtle cues of friction and impact. There was nothing she could not detect. His synesthetic perception precisely mapped the interior of the car inside her mind, showing her everything she might need to know. This was no vague impression or rough calculation. She had an innate grasp of the exact spatial relationships of everything on this limited battlefield. Now all she had to do was wait for the approaching enemy soldier to reveal the last bit of information she needed. She could feel the guard's confusion. Her snapshot shouldn't have landed, yet it had caught the advancing soldier right between the eyes. The survivors were breathing raggedly now, even their lungs betraying their alarm. The unexpected counterattack brought bewilderment and then a rush of fear. Still, Kanan knew that if she simply tried the brute force approach and charged the enemy position, she'd only provoke them into bringing their full firepower to bear. That would limit her options. She needed to modify the parameters of her fight first. Kanan was outgunned. She wasn't going to be able to change that. She might be able to drop one more of them with another quick shot, but then... Oops. Heard that too fast. But then she'd only wind up getting overrun. She only had one option. She could abandon cover, go for broke. She needed to drop 4 targets in the span of a single breath, or she'd be done for. Had that raspy laugh been hers or the enemy's? The guard's leader took aim at Kanan's forehead, his finger on the trigger. She picked up the dead man's gun. Not for ammo. To carry out the plan she'd envisioned, she knew she needed something more than her Beretta. The leader of the guards cried out. The subsequent barrage was too uncontrolled to be called suppressing fire. The 4 men fired wildly in vain to follow Kanan's nigh-inhuman movements. Kanan sped away. She could read the ripples of the air. She could even predict the movements of the soldiers' muscles, the angle of their gun barrels, the trajectories of their shots. Okay, we get it. She knows everything, but she knew that she couldn't hope to dodge every bullet. So before the storm could strike, she dived out the door of the car. Whoa, she's so cool. Now that was rough. I was gonna say she let out a soft sigh as her combined senses became distinct once more. She needed to neutralize 4 targets on the span of a single breath, and that was precisely what she'd done.
ほら見ろ。今更だけど、サーカスっていうのはこういうものだ。
She landed with a flourish back inside the train car. She had cleared out all the soldiers stationed in the forward compartment. They'd successfully recovered the payload and wiped out the enemy force. Now her task was to evacuate ASAP. She wanted to check in with Xian, but knew she shouldn't risk breaking radio silence without knowing the situation on his end.
シャムに救援はいらないだろうけど。
She wanted to rush to him, but knew Xian would be disappointed in her if she did. And now that she'd made it forward of the secure freight compartment, doubling back to the rear of the train only had to have come... Well, what the fuck? Doubling back to the rear of the train only to have come... Whatever, forward again would be a waste of time.
機関室に行って列車を止めさせた方がいいのかな。
With their cover blown, they certainly couldn't go to Amman. She and Xian would need to get off the train en route and conceal their whereabouts. Probably the sooner the better. The scent shifted. She heard sharp footsteps. She spun around, ready to fire. There was a rustling of clothes, and a new sensation crashed against her skin. Let me guess, Alphard. Did you betray us? Setika's arrival had helped put an end to the gunfight in the rear troop compartment. She'd caught 2 of the guards in a pincer attack, and before the last enemy had a chance to regroup, Xiam had managed to gun him down.
相変わらず手洗いなシャム。もういい年だろう。体を打たせるようなやり方はよせ。
Setika strolled over to him. Only after confirming that all the guards had been neutralized did Xiam finally let his mindset shift from combat readiness to simple high alert.
今回限りだ。お前が来ることは分かっていたからな。せいぜい目立つ的になって連中の背後を明かしたかった。
The tension between them eased. It had been years since they'd been alone in the same room together.
しかし、らしくない戦術だ。どうして後ろの車両に下がらなかった？優位な地点を確保しながら徐々に後退すれば、敵の戦力分散も誘えたはずだ。
Xiam considered. Maybe it really hadn't been necessary to make this car into the battleground. If it had accomplished one thing, it was allowing the fleeing passengers a chance to make it to safety.
まさかとは思うんだが、ちょっとした正義感かい？
雇い主への配慮だ。ことが発覚した以上、我々の素性は知られるだろう。解放戦線に雇われた側として、お前たちへの悪評を立てないよう努力したつもりだが。
今回の件はウイルス兵器なんてものを持ち出そうとしたイスラエル側に非があると。あくまで我々が鉄槌を下すのは彼女の盗っ人どもだけだと。なるほど。それは少し嬉しいんだが、同時に後味が悪いな。
それはどういう？
だってお前も私もトロほど嫌いなものはないだろう。せっかく守ったのに無駄な努力をさせてしまった。
Saw that coming.
さて、2つ断っておくよ、シャム。1つはケースを譲ってもらうこと。1つは1人残らず消えてもらうことだ。目撃者も当事者もまとめて掃除させてもらう。
That fucking The fucking stock scream sound effect. Gunfire and screams echoed from the back of the train. Someone was mercilessly gunning down the passengers who fled there for safety.
解放戦線側のエージェントはお前たち2人だけだが、私も個人的な部下を何人か連れてきていてね。今後部車両で働いているのはそいつらだよ。悪いな、お前がせっかく体。
Oh, sorry.
解放戦線を裏切ったのか。
裏切るも何もない。解放戦線において私はただのパトロンだ。それこそ定かを施したに過ぎんさ。今じゃ原理主義者に武装闘争のお株も奪われている。いい加減この辺りが縁切り時だ。
One who believes absolutely in a particular religious doctrine. Used here to refer to Islamic fundamentalists, these include radical anti-American and anti-Israeli factions, who have repeatedly come into armed conflict with the Israeli military. The slaughter continued. Several passengers who hadn't managed to flee to the rear of the train still cowered, trembling in the car where Shyam had battled the soldiers. A survival that would take an ironic turn when the butchers doing their work farther down the train reached this car.
矛盾している。そのトランクがあれば、解放戦線もお前の望み通り物騒になるはずだが。
その通り。これがパレスチナ側に渡れば、イスラエル側も黙ってはいまい。だが、戦力に劣るお前たちは、最終的にこいつの封を開けるだろう。そうなっては困る。何しろ、米軍にこいつを払い下げさせたのは私だからな。欲しいのは医者。それもとびきり物騒なね。しばらくするとこんな噂が流れる。米軍流出の生物兵器が輸送途中にヨルダン国内で襲撃され奪われた。輸送計画はイスラエル強硬派。襲ったのは解放戦線。ウイルスは誰の手に渡った。どれも真実はわからない。だが緊張だけは高まる。欲しいのはそれだけだ。ハルブはよろしくない。こういうおもちゃはきちんと使い方が分かっている人間が管理するものだ。
This was all a political farce, and an especially poor one at that. Neither the side transporting the weapon nor the side attempting to steal it would know where it had gone. Suspicion would beget suspicion, plunging the Middle East further into chaos.
イスラエル側はこの件を知らないのか。ウーアの試作品の取引は強硬派の独断か。
ああ、イスラエル側の総意じゃない。隅に追いやられつつある老人の悪あがきだ。今頃は連中も大慌てだろう。身内が何の相談もせず、自分たちの家に致命的な毒を運び込もうとしているんだ。まあ、その老人にとってはこれもイスラエルのための善意なんだろうがな。お前の口癖通り、信念というのは実に迷惑だよ。
Sean felt a dark cloud pass behind his eyes. This operation had been doomed to failure from the start. The Liberation Front had been played like a what? Like an ode? Like an ode, I guess. Key people had been handed the information they wanted, like they wanted it. After that, greed and anticipation had ensured that they'd acted predictably. Seeking only chaos and confusion, the instigator had used one of the oldest tricks in the book.
そして俺たちが死ねば、解放戦線も奪還に失敗したと判断するか。お前こそらしくない。そんな必要はないだろう。対立を煽るバカな。今さら第三者が油を注がずともこの地の火は消えん。
そうだな。この程度のコントロールは私が手を下すまでもないんだが、今回は他にも理由があった。ウーアの管理とお前の始末だ。お互い因縁だな、シャム。お前には2年前ウーアの実験を阻止できなかった負い目がある。ウーアの輸送が行われるとすれば 必ず食いついてくると分かっていた。となればお前を始末できるとしたら、それはもう私ぐらいしかいないだろう。もっともお前がここまでふぬけていたとは思わなかったが。
当事者の口封じか。ウーアの存在を隠すのに俺が邪魔になったのか。
ああ、だが決めたのは今じゃない。私は初めからお前を始末しようと思っていた。
初めから？俺がウーアを知ったのは2年前。お前とは4年前からの付き合いだが。
だからさ、お前は私の素性を知っている。生まれとかそんなどうでもいいことじゃない。兵士としての私の癖を知りすぎている。
Shiam stared at Sadaka through a haze of pain. Any secret weapon becomes less effective once its true capabilities are known. And she sees herself as a weapon. She'll kill me to maintain her effectiveness.
まさかな。極めて個人的な機密保持とは、俺も買いかぶられたものだ。それで、カナンは俺のついでか。
ああ、あれがウーアの生き残りであることも知っている。お前と同じ問題だよ。致死率 100% だったウイルス兵器の生存者だ。なぜ、どうして生き残ったのか。生存者分析は貴重なデータになる。
When she first arrived on the train, Sadaka had said something cryptic about looking into personnel and looking into a flaw with a weapon. Now it was clear that what she'd meant was that she wanted to gather information about an UA survivor and how the weapon had affected her. From the start, this job had been about nothing more than getting the most she could out of UA.
ウーアを利用する者として、唯一の生存者を直接確認したかったと。本当にそれだけか。
それ以外に理由はない。サンプルとして生きたまま捉えたかったが、あれはもういい。少しばかり特殊すぎる。扱いやすいサンプルとは言えないし、憎しみに駆られて今頃は無駄死にだ。
後部車両の処理完了しました。こちらの処理が済み次第撤退の準備を。
少し待て。機関部の同志との合流が遅れている。ヘリに連絡は入れておけ。
The sound of gunfire told of more passengers being cut down.
ヘリだと？
ああ、何しろこの列車はじき脱線するからな。その後歩いて帰るわけにもいかんだろう。イスラエル側も無能じゃない。撤収は早いだけいい。
She'd been very thorough. In all likelihood, she'd planted explosives further along the track. That would have been much simpler than tampering with the train directly. A crash might not completely destroy the train, but it would be enough to eliminate a half-naked... whatever that says. AI viewers! Hooray! But it would be enough to eliminate any remaining passengers. If the engine wasn't stopped before it was derailed, there would be no hope of saving anyone who remained alive on board.
ウーアに手を出した者と、それを奪った俺たちと、列車に居合わせた人間は一人残らず死亡する。だが、やり通せるか。
まさかあの小娘に期待しているのか。
Sadaka sneered. It was a crueler, colder expression than any Shiam had ever seen
ま
before.
るで使えない。少しは見込みがあると思ったが、あんなのは論外だ。ウーアへの憎しみで我をなくし、自らの性能を誤った。がっかりだ。お前の手腕も地に落ちたな。
それは違う。
He was dying, but his voice was firm. In the back of his mind, there was a whisper. Sadaka had sent some of her men to the engine compartment. Why hadn't they returned?
何が言いたい、シャム。
どうということのない自明の話だ。恐怖を知っている者は憎しみでは動かない。カナンはお前や俺とは違う。
The chill between them became acute. She lifted up her gun, taking aim at Shyam's forehead. Her expression said it all. This man before her had fallen from grace, and her disappointment had turned deadly.
断っておくが、私はお前を同胞とは思っていない。
それが正しい。なぜならお前は。
For one fleeting moment, their old connection was renewed. He spoke. She listened, saying nothing as she had often done so long ago.
気が変わった。やはり、とどめを刺しておこう。
なぜ初めから頭を打たなかった？
ジンクスだよ。今までお前は何度も被弾したが、不思議とただの一度も頭に当たったことはなかっただろう。
Her voice was hollow, as if she'd already put this all to an end. She raised her
不
gun.
思議でもなんでもない。頭を打たれなかったからこうして生きている。俺もお前もただの兵士だからな。
うん、知ってる。けどまあ、私にとってそういうイメージだったんだ。お前は。
Kanan to the rescue! Kanan came charging from the adjacent car. In the heat of her fury, she fired wildly but still managed to knock the gun from Sadaka's hand. Sadaka instantly retreated. She sensed instinctively, to her chagrin, that she couldn't defeat her young rival now. Under the circumstances, this was the prey she wasn't ready to hunt. Sadaka clicked her tongue, dismayed at being outfaced by such an impulsive attack. The girl had been so calm and collected before. Somehow she'd been transformed into a creature of pure emotion, a warrior, undefeated, and clearly beyond Sadaka's capabilities. The scent shifted. She heard sharp footsteps. She spun around, ready to fire her gun. There was a rustling of clothes, and a new sensation crashed against her skin. A volley of bullets whizzed right past her face. A chill ran down her spine. There were enemies other than the soldiers on board this crane. This one was dressed as a train engineer. Shaking off a premonition of disaster, she pursued this new foe as he retreated toward the front of the train. Right now, she needed to stop the engine. She followed the enemy who'd shot at her all the way into the driver's cab. Whoever the fake engineer was, he was defiant to the last, finally collapsing without a word. Looking around the cab, Kanan saw the murdered bodies of the real engineers, as well as a smashed control panel, which was now clearly useless. If this guy was wrecking the train, Kanan thought, he must not have been in league with the soldiers protecting it. And if there was some third party that they hadn't been aware of, Kanan broke into a sprint. If she had a better understanding of how the train functioned, she might have found some way to stop it by force, by destroying something in the engine room. But she had no time to ponder such things now. Her instincts spurred her into motion. The priorities of the situation had changed. As she raced back toward where she'd left Shyam and Sadaka, she reflected that she hadn't liked this job from the start. Something about this train just felt wrong, and its mottled colors had boded ill from the beginning. She ran as fast as she could. The sight of her previous battle and everything beyond reeked of the thick stench of death. Her dread of what she would find was almost overwhelming as she headed into the compartment that had held the second group of soldiers. All at once she saw pure, excruciating red. Violent emotion surged through her as she cut loose with a wild barrage. It was the first time since she'd first picked up a gun that she'd fired without certainty that she'd hit her mark. The bullets found their marks, and several of Sadaka's men fell dead, but how many moments had this brought Shyam? Sadaka had vanished toward the rear of the train, carrying the case with her. Kanan didn't even consider following her. Instead, dumbstruck, she dropped to her knees beside her mentor. Her mind couldn't process the situation. Just like a newly hatched chick, Xiam told her with the faintest of smiles.
カナン、
やだ。
She shook her head.
見ての通り、致命傷だ。
His voice was calm. He stared at him. Yada. She kept shaking her head slowly, inwardly imploring him not to die, but unable to put her plea into words. Xiam stirred. His consciousness was fading from blood loss, but the face before him was one he recognized. He shook himself back to awareness, recalling the young girl he'd found 2 years before. The memory hardly seemed real. Those days of mundane, everyday life hadn't really been his to live.
カナン、現状を確認する。
やだ。そんなのできない。把握なんてできない。
She knelt, still shaking her head as Sham calmly told her what had happened. Sadako had betrayed them. She had stabbed him and stolen the case with the bioweapon. The train would soon be derailed and destroyed. The train crew and passengers had been murdered, though there might still be a few alive. They'd failed miserably, and the situation was only getting worse. Sadako was getting away.
あんな女どうでもいい。それより早く手当てを。血さえ止めればまだ。
時間の無駄だ。お前には他にやることがある。目を覚ませかな。これは特別なことか。俺とあの女は同じ兵士に過ぎない。人間性を捨て去った兵士が同じ兵士に撃たれただけだ。そこに特別な意味を見出せと教えたか。
違う。シャムとあいつは違う。あの女のことは知らない。知りたくもない。けどシャムは違う。シャムは優しい。冷たいけどあんな人でなしじゃない。
He had no response. Wasn't he a monster? Well, perhaps not. He had recovered enough emotion to still feel to feel guilt at what she said, at least. Though that hardly made him human.
何をするべきかを測り、何ができるかを考えろと言っただろう。分かっているはずだ。俺たちの仕事はケースを取り返し、列車を止め、ウーアを根絶する。
It wasn't fair. He knew how to press her buttons, eradicate the Uwa virus. The very words that would transform Kanan from girl to soldier.
そちらの状況を、戦闘車両で何があった？
護衛はみんな倒した。機関士はあの女の仲間で、操作盤じゃ列車は止められない。機関室を壊すか、車両ごとにあるブレーキを使わないと。
他に生存者は？
貨物列車から先には誰もいない。
了解した。俺は列車を止める。お前は奴を追え。
Leaving Sham here, wounded as he was tantamount to letting him die. And why should he worry about stopping the train when they were the only passengers still alive? Kanan couldn't imagine leaving him to spending his final moments alone.
カナン、周りを見ろ。生存者は何人いる？
His soldier's edge wiped away her sentimentality.
教えてくれ、カナン。何人いるんだ？
She lifted her downcast eyes. In all their time together, he had never once relied on her exceptional nature. He had never shunned her for being different, always accepted her together with her curse, her gift. Now he needed her help.
3人いる。たった3人しかいない。
3人しか？
Yes, only 3. Amidst the sea of blood that surrounded them, 3 of the passengers still clung to life.
そうだ。
She doubted they had any chance of survival. Even with medical care, probably none of them would make it. But that wasn't how Sham saw things or how he wanted her to see it.
違う。3人も助けられる。
At that, he nodded. And maybe, just a little, he smiled.
列車は俺が受け持つ。連結を外しブレーキをかける程度だ。この体でも十分に現実的な役割だろう。 だがお前の方は少し骨だぞ。
でもすぐに戻る。
Her voice, her emotions under control at last. She was the consummate warrior now, just like he trained her to be.
カナン、お前は戦争によって過去を奪われた犠牲者であり、奴は権力闘争によって過去を失った敗北者だ。兵士としての起点は同じだが、あり方は異なっている。
Shyam's gun slid from his hand. It seemed in that moment like a symbol of his life. A hard and deadly weapon, a killer of many, now abandoned.
破壊によって生まれた兵士は憎しみを武器とする。俺と奴のうつろさは単にそれに焼き尽くされただけの話だ。その話を覚えているか？
覚えてる。憎しみには。
Don't hate. Even if the power it gave you let you destroy your opponent, if you cultivated such power, it would destroy you too in the end. Well done, he thought. Perhaps he really had managed to pass on all that he could. His lips curled into the ghost of a smile. He'd once said that death was the great equalizer, that it came the same for everyone, no matter who they were. Now Shyam's time had come, and Kanan realized with a sudden and surprising calm that she'd accepted it.
最後のタリウムだ。奴を逃がすな。より多くの命を救え。
シャムも元気で。
There was no grieving. They simply parted ways, each reflecting on the past 2 years and needing nothing more than that. Seneca stood atop the train. The scenery, a uniform brown for much of the journey, was now dotted with green in places. They were drawing close to their destination, the destination she had chosen. Very shortly, the train's usefulness would come to an end. There were less than 2 minutes to go before the rendezvous with the Black Hawk. Seneca carried the case in her left hand, handcuffed to her wrist, and gripped her gun with her right. The preparations had been flawless. The helicopter pilot was highly skilled. He would lower a ladder to her at her position, and she would simply ride it right on up. She'd accomplished most of what she'd wanted, and now her retreat would be swift. She should have been wholly pleased with the situation, and yet she was wholly dissatisfied. Of course, that would have been the case regardless of the results she'd obtained. It was not in her nature to ever be content. Only by striking out at the world around her could she even keep herself sane. And now her thirst for vengeance was worse than ever. A girlish silhouette appeared on the roof of the train not far away, and Sadaka felt her thirst change to a hunger. She more than had the upper hand here. If she were to go down, the case would fall down with her. And if the case were damaged, the Uwa virus would very likely be released. Which meant that the little lady couldn't shoot at her until she got the case away, whereas Sadaka was free to unload on her as much as she wanted. The kill was certain to be hers. How could she help but smile? She'd stolen the Uwa, stirred up both sides of an international conflict, and would soon eliminate the last witness to her scheme. It had been quite some time since she'd last scored such a coup. Her target was 3 cars away. Knowing her pistol's effective range, Sadaka gave herself an 80% chance of hitting. If Kanat had been 1 car closer, it would have been 100%. And since it wasn't like the girl could fly, she had no hope of escaping certain death. Sadaka aimed at the train car's roof just in front of Kanat's feet. Time for a little intimidation. Let's show this upstart what real skill looks like. She needs to understand that a step closer to me is a step into certain death. Sham struggled to his feet. He had a final job to do. There were 6 meters and a door between him and the coupling that linked this car to the next. Easy enough under ordinary circumstances. Once he undid the coupling, the automatic air brake would kick in and stop the rear section of the train. The distance seemed vast. How much time was it going to take him to do something as simple as waking up in the morning and watching his face? It was altogether too long and treacherous a journey that would use up all that remained of his life.
まだ消えてはいなかったのか。
Muddied memories played in his mind like scenes from an old movie. There's a time when I saw hope in the girl who made nihilism her reason to live. After that, I found hope in another girl's weakness as she clung to her desire to live. The hope Sadaka brought had been like copium, a drug he took to coax himself into thinking his actions were for the best. Somehow, at the time, he'd never realized his mistake. And then there was Kanan, a victim of war. She'd given him a kind of hope that brought all his own pain sharply into focus. Even at death's door, she thought nothing of dying, only wanting to live a life of meaning. He had no doubt now which kind of hope was the better one, but he still remembered both, just as he remembered the faith that had driven him long before he met either girl. That was decades ago now. How naive he had been, an unsophisticated firebrand clinging to blind belief. 3 wounded passengers, 3 people to save. The thought drove him on. 2 years earlier, he'd been unable to save anyone. He had been nothing but a killer. Did that make him a hypocrite now? Perhaps, but if so, for once he could accept his own hypocrisy. Sham blinked. His eyesight was failing. Maybe it was the light of truth that had blinded him. He was paying at last for the sin of casting aside his beliefs so long ago. Did he have the stamina to keep going? Of course he did. He trained himself to find new reserves of strength when it mattered most. War was always like this, after the mind and body had given out. A true soldier could forge onward on spirit alone, like a servant of the dead. It had been a long time since he'd taken a job that tipped the scales back toward the living. Of course, he'd always told himself that he killed so that he and others might live. Mercy and slaughter stemmed from the same behavioral principle, the struggle for self-preservation. Still, a soldier's deeds seemed to slip inevitably toward the negative end of the spectrum. He remembered how the long slide had started. The motives that had driven him to take up arms and pushed him further and further into the void. I will lose my life now. I will lose this emptiness. At long last, my balance will return to 0. Another memory. Oh my god. Before they boarded the train, the girl had begged him for a special boon. Just when had that happened exactly?
シャムの嘘つき全然痛くないって言ったのにこんなに痛むなんて聞いてなかった
Perhaps at the time, Sham had simply forgotten how painful it was. He'd been good at that after all. He asked her if the pain from her new tattoo would impair her for the upcoming job, and she shook her head.
痛いのは本当だけど嬉しいから性能は上がってるよ
The girl's skills really did change based on her emotions. Her good moods were rare, but when she was happy, her abilities were remarkable indeed. A tattoo was a small price to pay for that. This girl was quite probably the strangest person he'd ever known. Meeting her was an honor for him in a way. Even while her training made her into a soldier, she never truly let go of her feelings. Maybe she'd been a free spirit the whole time, or maybe her feelings are what helped her through it in part. It didn't matter which it was.
証だこれがある限り私はシャムの教えを忘れない
Remembering it now, he felt a vague sense of fulfillment. For a monster, he'd done a pretty good job. The two girls stood 30 meters apart. Kanan had stopped her advance just as at the edge of the third car. Sadaka waited, silent. Her rival could never hit her from there. Kanan took one more step. One more, and the real fun would start. The curtain had risen on the final act of the drama. The violent drone of a helicopter sounded in the distance. In a matter of moments, the chopper would arrive. Lowering the ladder, Sadaka would then ascend in triumph.
どうしたまさか見送りで済ますわけか このケースの中身はお前の恩敵だと思ったんだ。
Her challenge was a hiss upon the wind. Kanan glared. She knew she could reach her enemy in 5 seconds or less, but Sadako would need only 1 of those seconds to aim and fire. Kanan would be killed 5 times over if she charged. It was a risk she couldn't afford to take. She couldn't hope to win. Not under these conditions.
見逃すかバカ
Sadaka's taunt had stung her nerves. Her rival's voice was like a jagged claw, a filthy talon scratching at her temples. Kanan ground her teeth in frustration. She had no fear of charging in without a plan, but that wasn't going to work this time. That would give too much of an edge to her opponent.
拍子抜けだな。まあいい。それならそれで有効に使わせてもらうぞ。なあお嬢さん、このウーアは欠陥品だ。交渉にしか使えない。なぜか。簡単だ。兵器としては強すぎるからさ。
The ladder swayed down from the helicopter above. Sadako could make her escape in a moment if she chose. And yet she hesitated, savoring Kanan's defeat.
残念ながら兵器として使うにはまだ早い。優れた研究者に当てがわせて最短で2年というところだ。それだけやってようやく価値が生まれる。ようやくカタログに載せられる。わかるか。こいつが今まで殺してきた人数なんてものは成果にも入らない。ただの失敗だ。だが安心しろ。私がこいつを一人前に育ててやる。お前の両親を奪った兵器に立派な名前をつけてやる。そうだ。奴らが望む通り、せいぜい高値をつけて振りまいてやろうじゃないか。
Kanan fought back a wave of nausea. Ferocious colors danced before her eyes.
吠えてろそんなの私の知ったことじゃない
She heard a dull clang from somewhere ahead and felt a faint shudder through her feet. The train began to slow. Strength filled her limbs. She shifted her posture, ready to spring into action.
いいぞ。挑発の必要はなかったか。
She could see it in Kanan's eyes. The girl was ready to run right to her death. Everything was falling into place. The bleak scenery was opening out into a fertile landscape. Kanan was about to die. One step forward and there would be a resounding gunshot. But instead of moving, Kanan
お
spoke.
前本当はなんて言うんだ
Selka smiled inwardly. So that's what's been gnawing at her.
アルファルド。
That's Alpha. What? What? I couldn't have
お
guessed.
前にならなかった。どこにでもいるテロリストだよ。
And at her words, the race began. Sadaka, Alphard, stared in surprise. The instant that she realized that her first shot had missed, she pulled the trigger again. This time, her eyes went wide with shock.
この距離で私が外す。
The red-clad figure sped along the train car roof, zigzagging as she moved like a bolt of lightning. On she came, heedless of the death in the air around her. Bro, she can taste your bullets, bro. There is no doubt about it. The girl was dodging bullets. For a master markswoman like Alphard, it was a nightmare come to life.
避けるな。そんな話が。
What Kanan was doing simply shouldn't be possible. Just before each shot, she would change her trajectory unpredictably, shifting out of the bullet's path. Evasive movement was a standard tactic, but knowing precisely when and where to dodge, that required an inhuman ability to predict the future. And she can.
銃弾が見えているとでも。
That simply wasn't possible. Was it? Alphard's mind raced. She fought a rising wave of panic. The girl had almost reached her now. But Alphard still held one advantage, the case in her left hand. The girl would have to go for the case before attacking her directly. Alphard would just have to kill her before that. It was simple, just pull the trigger. And yet, she'd begun to doubt that she could hit Kanan. She struggled to comprehend what she was up against, her mind recoiling as she began to understand the full extent of this demon's powers. This bitch can taste words. Oh.
私が見ているのは集団なんかじゃない。
Her voice was like the whispers of the devil himself, speaking what was in Alphard's mind. She fixed her opponent with a victorious stare.
ただ私が見てるのはお前。
She can see my emotions? Of course, this girl could discern emotions like they were colors. She wasn't looking at the bullets or even at Alphard's movements. She was reading her enemy's expectations. She could tell exactly when Alphard believed that she would hit her mark, exactly when she would fire, and that was precisely when she'd dodge aside. As long as a foe had human emotions, this girl could predict what that foe would do an instant before it happened. This was it. Kanan was all confidence. She was closing in for the kill.
私もそうだと今気づいた。
The only way to ruin her enemy's predictions was to do something wholly unpredictable. As Alphard hurled the case from the train, Kanan instinctively launched after it. Realizing she'd been baited even as she was tumbling through the air, Kanan clutched the case to her chest and rolled to face her foe, reflectively bringing her gun to bear. Bullets whizzed in both directions. For an instant, the two combatants seemed suspended in a kind of distorted balance. Two natural opposites in opposition. What a line. One who could sense emotions and one who could eliminate them. By all rights, they should have been evenly matched, but Kanan's own emotions tipped the scale in her favor. Alphard had let herself get too drawn in, so she had forced herself to swallow her hatred for a moment, and fired at the girl as if at the girl as if at a simple obstacle. She would find a color of determination that Kanan could not see. And yet even those shots failed to strike home. Even with her hatred suppressed, her intentions could be read. She would need to discard her hate, to divorce even her will to win from her actions. Only then would she be able to slay the super person. But the girl's bullets also failed to hit. Twisting through the air, fighting to keep hold of the case, she couldn't aim with perfect accuracy. Throwing away the bioweapon had been a split-second decision on Alphard's part. She hadn't spared an iota of consideration for the thousands who might die if the case broke open. Kanan trembled as an evil chill ran down her spine at the sight of Alphard standing on the train. There she saw not another woman, but an angel of death, inorganic destruction made flesh. She rolled as she struck the ground, safeguarding the case with her body. The impact scattered her senses. She struggled to remain conscious as she bounced along, focusing on protecting her precious burden. If it broke open now, everything she and Shyam had done would have been for nothing. At last she slid to a stop and lay there panting with exertion. She checked the case before she checked herself for injuries. The case was intact. Next, following standard protocol, she began assessing her own scrapes and bruises. The grating screech of the brakes filled the air. The wheels threw up a shower of sparks along the rails as the train receded. Already the last battlefield they had shared was withdrawing into the unreachable. Shyam. There was no sadness. They had already made their farewells. Instead, she felt a grim contentment and a steely pride. Anyone with her abilities could have handled the challenges she'd faced, but Shyam had been on the brink of death, and yet he had succeeded at a task that would have been difficult for anyone. He'd finished things as he had lived, a trustworthy soldier to the very end. And my dad... She had failed to retrieve the Uwa virus, the train had been spotted, and her test subject had gotten away. Never had she been so defeated. She had killed Shyam and stoked the flames of conflict between two opposing camps, but those achievements didn't change the fact that the operation had been a failure. To be denied a single objective was, to her, a crushing loss. Failing on 3 counts was intolerable. One of her subordinates was calling out from behind her, but her attention remained focused on a point on the ground far behind and below. It was over. The Uwa in that case was, after all, only an old prototype. She had other options. There was a pharmaceutical firm already performing research on a superior form of the virus. There was no need to stay and risk capture for the sake of the virus. But it was hard to take her eyes off the girl. The girl was crawling along the bare earth beside the track, a bitter reminder of failure. Her thoughts shifted back to Sham. The man had fallen from grace. In the 11th hour, he seemed to have embraced that saying from the Quran, that for whosoever killeth a human being, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind. He'd refused to continue being a tool to that very end. Destroying him was no betrayal. She'd never regarded him as kin. Her decision to eliminate him had been motivated by the simple fact that he'd been in her way. After all, as he'd said himself, she smiled darkly as she recalled his words. That's right. Yet he failed to understand that there'd never been anything there to begin with. She was an empty shell with no false dignity to protect. She'd never had anything to lose but flesh and blood. Sham should have recognized this, but the man was himself a broken being. Alphard had never really been alive. It was laughable, really. Conflict was what mattered to her. That was her driving force. She had lost her family and discarded her past, retaining only what enabled her to survive. The ashes of her former self were scattered across the world. Every weakness burned away in the crucible of conflict. She couldn't imagine anything but hatred for the rest of humankind. Now her eyes were like fire as she stared down at the girl below. Kanan might still be in range of the right kind of weapon. The helicopter circled around and headed westward, passing directly over the girl beside the tracks. As it did, Alphard and Kanan exchanged a silent stare. Down below, Kanan continued to stare, seeing in her foe a dark reflection of herself. They're like two sides of the serpent. Whoa! Their origins were so similar. They're two serpents born from the same twisted nest, guided by the same mentor, and yet they had followed very different paths. They had no familial ties, yet they were sisters all the same, bound by a fate thicker than any blood. Kanan didn't take her eyes off of the helicopter until it had disappeared over the horizon. Her hatred was a potent force, but even stronger now was her sense of duty. She would stop that terrorist. The girl who had possessed no goals had finally found a sense of determination born within her.
着陸態勢に入ります。ベルトを締め、電子機器の電源はお切りください。
Kanan stirred. Her eyes slowly drifted open. A long dream receded. She'd been on the ground within the hour. Once the plane had landed, she would disembark by a different route than the other passengers, then board a helicopter that would be waiting for her on the runway. She stretched and resettled, steeling her resolve. After the mission in Jordan, she had gone on to learn of a certain distinguished family wiped out in a political conflict, and how its sole surviving daughter had been trained as a mercenary. But that was a story from the past. It wasn't her story anymore. Right now, she just needed to head out to Shibuya, save Maria, and put a stop to the Serpent's actions.
Maria.
She resisted the urge to hurry to her destination. Taking out her cell phone, she... What? Oh my god. Don't do this to me! I'm not doing it. Fuck you. Well, I have... Like, what? Oh my god. No. What do I do? If I press this... and this starts an entirely different route, and then if I want to finish this Kanan thing, I have to go back from the beginning. I can't risk that. I can't risk it. I just can't. But I'm so curious. No, fuck you, Maria. Sorry. Maybe next time. She knew it was a pointless act. Surely Maria would be unable to answer the phone. Remember the true ending phone call? Oh! Oh! Would she... That's what this is? So I should do it then? I'm scared. I want to see how this ends. I'm sorry. I want to see how this ends first. Don't do it. I'm not going to do it. Okay, thank God. Incredibly, the call connected. Kanan gasped as if she'd seen a go. Why is that? A sound of sobbing came through the receiver. She didn't actually need to ask. Kanan could tell just from the sound of the breathing that it was Maria on the line. She felt a rush of joy. She wasn't too late after all. Maria's voice was happy. Her tears were tears of joy. Kanan let out a strange laugh, feeling that their positions had been strangely reversed. Maria had been concerned for her well-being. Or for her well-being. She heard in her happy sobs the sound of a dear friend who had somehow survived a very long and harrowing day. Maria proceeded to put Kanan on the phone with a man named Jack Stanley, a U.S. operative who had helped to keep Maria safe. In 10 minutes of hurried conversation, he brought her up to speed on the situation. The people of Shibuya had managed to stop the Uwa virus from running rampant through their city. But there was one worrisome detail. It was Stanley's superior, Gordon, who had escorted Alfred away. Kanan recognized the name. She was certain that Gordon was one of the Serpent's collaborators. She was appalled at the naivete of the Japanese police. They hadn't arrested the terrorist, they had merely taken her into custody. Thanks to Gordon's intervention, Alfred's whereabouts were now unknown. It would be extremely difficult to track her down. She allowed herself a cautious smile. If Gordon was acting on his own, he'd have to use the airport. She probably had about 30 minutes left to act. For an ordinary person, that would be a hopeless situation, but Kanan wasn't an ordinary person. At a facility with this many people, this many colors, the color of danger would stand out clear as day. She hung up the phone. Her anxious pacing had ceased, stilled by her steely determination to confront her enemy at last.
私の名前を語るなんて。
I might be overthinking it, but how the hell does she know Japanese? That just seems crazy to me. She's that fluent that she can talk with Maria. I'm not even like talking about the context of it being in the game, but like in the world of Shibuya Scramble. I don't know. I guess she would have to learn different languages to be a mercenary. What an outrageous deception. Something had changed in the serpent. She was toying with her far more than
いい
usual.
よ。そういうことならたっぷりお返ししてやろうじゃないか。
It went against Kanan's own sensibilities, but trickery seemed like the perfect tactic to use against these forces. Maria and her companions had been played like puppets. It was time to return the favor. The sound of propeller blades cut the air. Voices were barely audible beneath the roar as the craft prepared for takeoff.
失礼します。ミスカナンですか？
The agent, obviously a last-minute deployment, looked like a nervous wreck. His scent was startlingly harmless. He hardly seemed suited for the job.
そうだけど、これもう出るの？
はい、それはもちろん。あ、でもですね、どうなんでしょうね。飛べることは飛べるんですけど、あ
なたこういうの初めて？
え？あ、はい、初任務です。ありがとうございます。
She decided to ignore his bumbling. Her first impulse was just to kick this dolt, but obviously that wouldn't do. Since befriending Maria, she'd become far less inclined to casually strike out at fools who got in her way.
それで銃の補充はさせてもらえるの？
いえ、それが銃ですよね。もちろん用意してありますが、そういうのはどうなんでしょう。
Kanan stared at him.
何か問題でも？
はい、言いにくいんですけど、事件はですね、つい先ほどきれいさっぱり解決したと。
She held her tongue, all part of the
解
act.
決した？
It seemed best to feign ignorance just to be on the safe side. This man's color was trustworthy enough, but the hue of the copter pilot on standby was harder to read. An unsightly blue, proof that he had contact with the killer. Better play dumb. She couldn't risk blowing this golden opportunity.
ごめん、詳しく説明して。
はい。でも怒らないでくださいよ。
Explained the situation, profusely apologetic all the while. He told her about the panic that had befallen Shibuya. I was there. The existence of Uwa had been exposed. Alfred had been taken in by the CIA, and Maria Osawa was now under police protection.
そうか。じゃあ。
はい。カナンさんは全くの無駄足というか。
He was a man of far too many words. No matter. She could understand his unease from his perspective. She was an uninvited guest. To the good agent here, she was a meddler trying to usurp the CIA's rightful target. To the helicopter pilot, she was simply a nuisance who'd arrived a few minutes ahead of schedule. But the fact was that they were the ones who had no part to play on the stage. Not if her plan was going to work anyhow. Maria and the others had slipped through Alfred's fangs, unexpectedly providing Kanan with one last chance. Now it was up to her to seize it.
この街、渋谷との相性は最悪だったな。テロリスト。
She shrugged off a momentary twinge of self-doubt. Maria had survived so far without Kanan's help. It did seem a bit outrageous for her to get involved now. And this novice agent was right about one thing. Her initial plan for the trip had, in fact, been a total waste. But still, she felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. Perhaps she'd secretly been hoping it would come down to a single desperate encounter all along. Another moment when fate, which is capitalized, took a strange twist, and everything changed. Like that hectic day on which she'd first met Maria. She cast her mind back to their first encounter, that unexpected brightness. It felt like so long ago. She'd seen in this wayward stranger a comforting color, a hue that felt inexplicably familiar. And suddenly, after all this time, she realized why.
そうか。
How strange that she'd never realized before. Maria shone with the same color as Kanan's older sister. No wonder she triggered so many memories of youth. Kanan had been isolated as a child, spending more and more time alone with her peculiar senses. Yet she had remained close to her family. It was their warmth that had tied her strange self to the world around her. Maria didn't literally resemble her lost sister, but she had brought her warm color back into Kanan's life. There in the prop wash of the waiting helicopter, Kanan giggled despite herself. She felt ridiculous for only realizing something like this now, but she was glad that it had happened nonetheless. The novice agent stared at her in confusion. Kanan nodded reassuringly. Maria was safe for now, but she still had one last job to do. Kanan took the gun she'd been provided, then flashed the agent a girlish smile. Turning away from the hired chopper, she headed for the main concourse like an ordinary tourist. An ordinary gaijin. Her long journey was over now. She had finally found something stronger than hatred. Their parting seemed ages ago now, but she lived up to the training he had given her, to be a warrior, to live for something greater than revenge. That training had gotten her to where she was now. She would not be something hollow like the serpent. She would hold her head high, strive to meet Sham's ideal, and fight for her future. She had come to protect Maria, the friend who'd showed her how to hope again. Now it was time for a final showdown. It was time to make that hope a reality. Yay! I kind of wanted to see their duel though. Like, how did it end? I guess it doesn't matter. Well, there is like an anime, right? Does it follow up from this? Because if it does, I might watch that. That was way longer than I thought it was gonna be. But we did it. That was actually kind of cool. I liked it. It was a bit wordy. Not even a bit. It was very wordy. Oh, it's different? Really? I'll probably still watch it. I like Kanan as a character. I think she's actually kind of cool. I am a sucker for those kinds of characters that are like, you know, have to kind of distance themselves from their emotions and then learn to be a human again. I like that. So Kanan's cool. The whole thing with Alphard was kind of cool. Just really wordy is the only problem. I can only find one longer video. It's also in English. Well, if it's a whole ass anime, I'll just like watch all of it. Well, I'll see that next second. I think this is gonna be the end of the scramble, though. I'm sorry. I don't think I have it in me for anymore. I might come back to read the Suzune side story thingy. But other than that, I think this is it. This is Type Moon. Partner in Time. Hello. Kanan the anime has an English dub proper. Oh, sick. Okay. Dude. The Solitary Serpent. Let's take a look at this clip that Omega Kupo sent. And then I think that's it. Also, hi. Just wanted to say that the video they linked in is the final episode? How about one scene? Should I watch it? Oh, you want to do... Okay, fine. Fine, for you. Just for you. Osawa, 12:30. Kanan. I miss her already. At 12:30, huh? You said Osawa. Right here. That yellow gloves. This, I actually kind of remember this. This was a weird moment. Or is it this one? It's gotta be this one, right? Yeah. Was your right? Tanaka, laid a hand on the shoulder. Calm down. Posure. Oh, is sorry. No, that's it, right? Right here, then. It's 13 episodes. You can either buy the D. Yeah, that's not. I'm probably not gonna do that. I have other ways. So yeah, I'm probably gonna see all the 7 seeds for that. Wait on when you get to that scene. Wait on that screen. It's not. It's not this, right? Or is it after this? Okay. Oh, the close up. Right. Ba, ba, ba. All right, so we're gonna wait for like 5 minutes. I have to wait for it to pan all the way to the right. I see it moving, yeah. I thought it was something in the bathroom. I did, yeah. We watched like a trailer for that, the Scramble stories, yesterday. The 428 story ain't over yet. It did look pretty cool, actually. I'm conflicted with this game, but honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to playing another one. Maybe not the entirety of it on stream. Maybe on my own, but we'll see. Not all the way. So do I just go now? Very compliment or an encouraging word. Wait. Okay, I'm waiting. I thought I was painting all the way or something. Oh my fucking god. Yeah. I see it. Whatever that is. Blue. And white and red. Let's look up maybe a thermometer. No. Maybe some kanji. It's like a speech bubble. Oh, enter that command. Right, BBB, right? Is that it, or is there more to it? Looking Konami code here. I'm gonna do it. Bruh. Kajiwara. Oh my god. Kajiwara looked across the interrogation room table at the robbery suspect who sat opposite. Please, the detective said, all I ask is that you tell me what you know. What's in it for me if I do? The suspect leaned back in his seat and crossed his arms, a smug look on his face. A casual observer glancing in at the door would have had trouble deciding who was interrogating whom. Anyways, yeah, out of the 22 side stories that would take forever to read all of them, yeah, that's not good. This one is an episode from the slapstick detective manga that Kajiwara himself said is being made centered. Oh shit, I do vaguely remember that. Him saying that. Alright, I'll give this game some credit. I'll give it credit. All the like silly side shit I didn't think they were gonna follow up on, they actually did. They just hid it behind hidden commands and pop quiz stuff. A casual observer glancing in at the door would have had trouble deciding who was interrogating whom. A less experienced detective would probably have blown a fuse. What's in it for you, Kajiwara remained as detached as ever. Over the years of interrogation practice, he'd developed a laid-back, low-pressure style. Well, if you don't give me anything, I'm just going to have to keep talking. By now, their back and forth had been going on for quite some time. Kajiwara stole a glance at his wristwatch. Just want to take a quick look. I'm going now. Bye, y'all. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for stopping by. It was after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I know you didn't have lunch, so I bet you're hungry. Here, eat up. The detective produced a deep-fried curry bun from his pockets. Smiles go for miles. Would you prefer a banana? Asked Kajiwara. The man cracked a faint smile as he accepted the curry bun. You sure it's okay doing this? Why wouldn't it be? Isn't this an under-the-table bribe to get me to incriminate myself? What if I testify in court that I was coerced into giving a confession? Then I'll bill you for the curry bun. With tax, it comes to 280 yen. The suspect was taken aback. 280 yen? Isn't that kind of expensive? They're handmade from my favorite bakery. My voice gone. Waited in line myself to buy them this morning. Kajiwara took another curry bun from his pocket for himself. The two ate in silence, a temporary cessation of hostilities. Need something to drink? The detective produced a carton of milk from his pocket. I hate milk. Gives me indigestion. I see. Kajiwara reached back into his pocket, this time pulling out a cup. Whoa, hey, hold up. The man's expression turned quizzical. What is this? It's a vessel you use for drinking beverages. No, I know what a cup is. Kajiwara pulled a teapot out of his pocket. It was filled with scalding hot black tea. This shouldn't upset your stomach. Go on, have a cup. Seriously, hold on. Oh, are you not familiar with black tea either? No, that's not it. The man slammed his hands on the table and glared back at Kajiwara. What the hell is with your pockets? How much stuff do you have packed in there? How much? Shall we see? Kajiwara reached a hand into a pocket. He proceeded to pull out a comb, a handheld video game, some rice crackers, a screwdriver, a folding umbrella, a stuffed Tama plush. Wait. The man waved his arms in agitation. How the heck do you have so much stuff in there? It's quite convenient, really. That's not the point, the man shouted. The interrogation room door opened and another policeman stuck his head in. Detective Kajiwara, may I have a moment? From the look on the other officer's face, Kajiwara surmised at once what was going on. There was a new case. He stepped out of the briefing room, and his colleagues explained the situations. We've received a tip-off that a wanted individual has checked into Shibuya Central Hospital under an assumed name. Leaving the robbery suspect to another detective, Kajiwara prepared to head to the scene. When he got to the motor pool, however, he found that all of the squad cars had been taken out. Without much other choice, he hopped onto a bicycle. He took a rotating police light from his pocket and set it on the bike's basket. Then he pedaled away at top speed. Upon arriving at the hospital, Kajiwara hurried into the lobby. He scanned the area looking for the suspect. The individual in question was 180 centimeters tall, weighed 90 kilos, and had a big scar near one eye. Kajiwara recalled hearing that he was a former rugby player. His colleague, Detective Kano, had been a rugby player too. From what Kajiwara had seen, most rugby players were quite physically capable. This arrest would require some finesse. Aha! The detective nearly voiced his surprise aloud. A large-statured man was sitting on one... Him giving that fucking peace sign is... Stop looking at me like that. A large-statured man was sitting on one of the sofas in the lobby. Surely Kajiwara couldn't have gotten so lucky right off the bat. He quietly approached and peered at the man's face. The fellow had a big scar near his eye. There was no doubt about it. This was the wanted man. Excuse me, Kajiwara said calmly. The suspect stared, then lunged forward and gave him a powerful shove. The man was even stronger than Kajiwara had imagined. The detective went sprawling onto the lobby floor. The man took off running. He was remarkably quick for someone who was supposed to be sick. Once he'd made it outside, he snatched Kajiwara's bicycle and zoomed away. Damn it! The detective pulled a skateboard from his pocket and went after him. The culprit took a look back over his shoulder, his jaw dropped in astonishment. He sped into a nearby parking garage. Evidently, he had some sort of remote control because a shutter dropped down to close the entrance behind him. What the heck? Taking a chainsaw from his pocket, Kajiwara cut through the steel shutter like it was paper. When he stepped inside, he saw that the suspect was taking the elevator to the rooftop. By the time Kajiwara reached the rooftop himself, the man had hopped over the guard fence and leapt to the building next door. The crook grinned at him, his face flushed with triumph. There was a good 6-meter gap between the buildings. Kajiwara would never be able to make that jump. Aha! I've got just the thing. From his pocket, the detective pulled a long rope with a grappling hook on one end. Hurling the hook with all his strength, he hooked it onto the fence of the adjoining building. Yeah! Unleashing a battle cry, the detective jumped and swung to the next building. The suspect was dumbstruck as Kajiwara stood before him. I think that's enough of this little game of tag, Kajiwara said. But there was still a glint of defiance in the criminal's eyes. He crouched low, shoulders hunched and arms at the ready. It looked like he was... I almost read that as gooning. It looked like he was going to launch into a rugby tackle. Kajiwara couldn't stand up to a head-on charge from someone that big. He might well go careening over the edge of the roof to splatter on the concrete far below. Should he dodge aside then? No. If this guy was a rugby player, that would be no easy feat. The culprit stared him down, then began to rush forward. Dodging wasn't an option. Neither was bearing the brunt of the impact, which left only one thing. Aha! Kajiwara pulled a hose from his pocket. Oh my fucking... It was this kind... It was the kind used by fire engines 50 millimeters in diameter. Take this. Just before the criminal could land the tackle, the limp hose suddenly plumped up. A massive torrent of water gushed forth. The burly man was blasted backward as if he were an empty paper bag. There's more where that came from. Kajiwara continued to unload water on the man, battering him into unconsciousness. Then he looked down at the culprit, lying there on the rooftop, and quietly shook his head. If you hadn't tried to resist, none of this would have been necessary. Kajiwara himself was drenched head to toe with water. He reached into his pocket for his handkerchief. His hand stopped. Kajiwara sighed and shook his head. Of all the days to forget his handkerchief. Thank you, Kajiwara. No bananas, though. Is it still going? It is. Okay. I think that's it. That is it. I'm calling it. Banana. How the fuck do I get out of here? Take me home. There you go, title screen. Alright, Shibuya. You scrambled my brain. And it was nice to know you. But I have to sign off on the scramble. Very interesting game, very unique game. Very hard to stream. But I'm not gonna say it was a bad experience. I understand why people like this for sure. And I'm honestly kind of interested in the Kanon stuff, so I might watch the anime and get back to you on how that was. Even though it seems to be disconnected. And I'm actually kind of interested in the sequel whenever that comes out. Maybe I'll stream it for like 1 or 2 streams, but I don't think I'm going to do the entire thing like I did with this. But yeah. Onward to greener pastures. So, hold on. Let me open this. Let me get some music. Onward to Purgatory, yes. Get some music playing. So I did buy Look Outside, and I also have Half-Life. I was about to say Halo. I have Half-Life. Those two are going to be lined up. Sorry, this might be kind of loud. Considering next week is the 4th of July, I have a very long weekend coming up. So I think I'm going to do a double stream next week. I was told to start with the original because, and I mean, it makes sense because I'm probably going to play Half-Life 2 as well. And it'd be cooler to see like the improvements between the first game and the second, since Black Mesa's like, I think that came out after Half-Life 2, maybe like a remake kind of thing. I don't mind it. I want to see the progression between the games. Yeah. I'll probably go back and play Black Mesa too. If I like it enough, we'll have to see. So we're gonna do Look Outside next. I'll start installing that right now. I'm gonna stream. I actually might stream 3 times next week. 152 achievements? Jesus Christ. Oh my god. We're gonna get this game done, and then after that, like all of July, I think, is gonna be Half-Life and possibly Half-Life 2. If I like Half-Life 1 enough. It's kind of funny you bought Orange Box back in 08. That's the entire reason you made a Steam account. It comes full circle. What else is there? Oh yeah, there is a Steam sale happening. I didn't see what was on my wish list. Bruh. Hello? Yeah, Look Outside. I heard it was interesting. I honestly have no idea about, like, other than what I've seen on Steam. I have no fucking clue what this game's about, so it could be interesting. It seems kind of horror adjacent. And honestly, I'm not great with horror. But I doubt it'll be anything I can't handle. So, that's the best way to go into it. Hold on, why isn't my wish list showing? There we go. What do I need to buy? Oh, I should probably get this, right? Stanley Parable. And I still haven't played Lunar. I'm kind of interested in playing that. It's only 30% off, though. Anything between those games is going to be completely random. I could play Soul Hackers 2. I could play, like, a Fire Emblem game. I don't know. But I think Saturdays and Fridays will be reserved for either Look Outside or Half-Life. And then any other day I stream, I'll be playing some bullshit. Or Zenki Zero Speedrun. Still haven't done that. I still actually want to do that. You have Sifu on the Switch? You got for free? Oh, an Epic? Really? Honestly, I'm probably never gonna play that game. I've been thinking about buying it for fucking years. It's just gonna sit there. Maybe I'll play that one day. There's too many games, dude. There's too many games. I still haven't played all the East games. I still haven't played Expedition 33. There's so much shit. But yeah, that's what's coming up next. Let me see what days are good for me. Yeah, I might sneak a stream in on Tuesday or Wednesday. If not, then expect me on Friday. We'll start Look Outside. We'll play that for Friday, Saturday. And then after that, depending how long that takes, because the week after I could also stream more too. I don't have to work that much. We'll start Half-Life in July. But yeah, Shibuya. That was fun while it lasted, kind of. Not always, but kind of. I don't regret playing it, but it's over, is all I'm gonna say. But thank you to everybody who came out tonight. Pork Bob, Neo Omega Kupo, thank you for the help. Very, very helpful as always. Partner in Time, Meat Miner, Lodestar Claus, and Nick from Loptis. I appreciate it. And anybody else that might have stopped by, and anybody else that might have seen this or might see this in the future. Yeah, get out of here. Next week we're gonna start something new. But until then, peace out.